Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my two comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good afternoon, friends. It's Patrick Christys here, and you're with me at 3. What's on the menu today? Well, it's this. Is Britain about to have an open border with terror hotspots? It looks like Rishi Sunak's master plan to remove the asylum seeker backlog is to, well, just wave tens of thousands of people through. Leaked plans appear to show that there will be no face-to-face interviews, just a questionnaire. And these will go to people coming from places like Afghanistan and Syria, and it's expected at least 95% of them will indeed be waved through. Well, it's been called an asylum seeker amnesty, and we are obviously going to be talking about that rather a lot on this show. Is the IRA back? 3 men have been arrested under the Counter-Terrorism Act after a police officer was gunned down in front of children in Northern Ireland. Now, if you've had a blistering row with your husband or wife today, you're not the only ones. I will be revealing what city in the UK has the highest rate of divorce and what people argue about most. I'll give you a clue. I've got a few of them right here in the studio, OK? So think on. And GB News could be about to be the home of boxing. That's right, we can confirm that we are in talks to host a boxing match between political heavyweights, Deputy Chair of the Tory Party Lee Anderson and annoying Remainer protester Steve Bray. That's right, seriously people, I have put my name forward to be at least a ring girl in all of this, but get your emails coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Should we interview every single asylum seeker before we let them live here? And as well, crucially, which two political figures should fight on the undercard of Lee Anderson and Steve Bray? gbviews@gbnews.uk, but right now it's your headlines with Rhiannon.
Patrick, thank you. Good afternoon. It's 2 minutes past 3. Your top stories from the GB newsroom. 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following the shooting of a high-ranking officer in Omagh. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was targeted by 2 masked gunmen while with his son at a sports centre last night. He's in a critical but stable condition in hospital. Police say dissident group the New IRA is the primary focus, and they're now reviewing the threat level. Chief Constable Simon Byrne told reporters a respected colleague is fighting for his life.
Clearly, as an organisation, we are utterly shocked and angered by last night's brazen and calculated attack. John is a father, husband and colleague, and a valued and active member of his local community. John's colleagues are understandably extremely distressed by last night's shooting. However, they remain resolute and committed to bringing those responsible for this heinous crime to justice.
Well, former police ombudsman for Northern Ireland, Baroness Nuala O'Lone, told GB News this will bring back memories of all that's happened previously in the region.
This shooting of Mr. Caldwell is something exceptional, though, and it seems to be connected with the fact that he's a police officer. And that means that every police officer who got up this morning and put their uniform on will have reflected. Every police officer going out to work will have reflected, what does this mean to me? And their children and their spouses and their parents, their siblings. Everyone will be saying what's going on.
The number of asylum seekers waiting for an initial decision on their claim has hit 160,000. That's the highest level since records began. The figures come as the Home Secretary tells GB News in an exclusive interview that nothing's ruled out when it comes to tackling illegal immigration. More than 45,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats last year, which Suella Braverman describes as unacceptable. Speaking to Liam Halligan, she also said she understands why people are frustrated with hotels housing asylum seekers.
It's clear that we have an unsustainable situation in towns and cities around our country whereby, because of the overwhelming numbers of people arriving here illegally and our legal duties to accommodate them, we are now having to house them in hotels, and that is causing understandable tensions within communities, pressures on local resources.
And you can watch the full 22-minute interview with the Home Secretary on the GB News YouTube channel. Sir Keir Starmer has outlined his vision for the country if Labour were to win the next general election. Launching his party's 5 national missions, the Labour leader says the UK needs to be more competitive. The economy was highlighted as a top priority and he promised to be tough on crime. Sir Keir says sticking plaster politics is holding everyone back.
The pattern is always the same. Distracted by the short-term obsessions that fixate Westminster, held back by a cynicism which uses low trust in politics as an excuse to narrow our ambitions, blinkered to the potential of an active government setting the direction, we lurch from crisis to crisis, always reacting, always behind the curve. A sticking plaster, never a cure.
4 people have been arrested after a huge Ukrainian flag was painted outside the Russian embassy in London. Hundreds of litres of yellow and blue paint were poured onto the road, representing the country's colours across 500 square metres. Protest group led by donkeys has claimed responsibility, saying the massive flag marks the first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine, which is tomorrow. And tributes have been pouring in for football commentator John Motty Motson, who's died aged 77. Gary Lineker describing him as England's voice of football for generations. He became synonymous with the beautiful game during his distinguished 50-year career with the BBC. He covered 10 World Cups, 10 European Championships and 29 FA Cup finals before retiring from the organisation in 2018. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens now, though. It's over to you, Patrick.
Right, lots to go at today, and we start with the government's latest plan to tackle the massive migrant crisis and the asylum seeker backlog, with around 160,000 people currently applying for asylum in this country, which is costing me and you a reported £2.1 billion a year. The authorities desperately need to clear that backlog, and we were all waiting, weren't we, with bated breath to see what Rishi Sunak's grand plan would be. Well, it's essentially to wave them through, it would appear. And this is what the government is proposing. They're going to scrap face-to-face interviews with thousands of asylum seekers and ask them to fill in a questionnaire. So it's thought that about 12,000 people, and this is interesting as well, from Afghanistan, Syria, Eritrea, Libya and Yemen, who have applied for asylum in the UK and are waiting for a decision, will be eligible under the policy being launched today by the Home Office. Now, bear in mind as well that around 90% of people from Afghanistan and Syria are already granted asylum once they actually apply for it, and some 95% of people are tipped, according to sources, to be waved through if this plan goes ahead. It does lead me to ask the question, have we now got an open border with Afghanistan and Syria? But the plans aim to speed up the process for people from nations that typically have a high grant rate, as I've just said. Look, the questions here almost write themselves, don't they? Is this a massive security risk? Do you feel as though, seriously, we have an open border through the back door, for want of a better phrase, with places like Afghanistan and Syria, which clearly, I mean, in the case of one of them is definitely run by a terrorist organisation, and in the other one, at least part of it is. But joining me now is Deputy Leader of UKIP, Rebecca Jane. Rebecca, thank you very much. Do you fear that we're going to have an open border with terror hotspots?
Don't fear it, we have it. For goodness sakes, this is absolutely ludicrous. So there's no security, there's
no interview. There's 40 questions, and then what you get is a free pass to come on in, and you've got free healthcare, housing, money, the lot. This is currently restricted to 5 countries potentially, but there are plans to actually make it bigger as well. So Rishi Sunak, his plan is actually just welcome everybody to England. He has no plan. He may as well stand on the beach, give everybody a cup of tea as they come. And actually, one thing that we will pick up once again is that of all asylum seekers who claim to be children, 70% turn out to be adults. And we have no criminal checks. And this is why further criminal actions then unfold. And obviously, we are giving a heck of a lot of money for our people that we don't even have.
Well, what Rishi Sunak would presumably say to this is we currently have a backlog of around 150 to 160,000. It's costing you and me and the taxpayer around 2.1 billion quid a year. Maybe if we just got them to fill in a questionnaire and not a face-to-face interview, it would reduce that. They could start getting work and pay tax instead of, well, the taxpayer paying for that.
Yeah, and that's not going to happen, is it? Obviously, you know, there are no checks. It is, it's an absolute mistake, obviously. Rishi needs to be getting a proper, serious crackdown on this. Our government can't be trusted to have this in their hands. What we're now going to see unfold is that we're going to have more crime. We're going to have more of a hold on our security services. We're going to be ploughing more into education. We don't have this money to be able to defend what is currently happening. And Rishi Sunak is putting this country in a position of absolute detriment, and it's a danger to our children, to adults, to absolutely everybody.
When you look at some of the countries in play here, Afghanistan and Syria, for example, I mean, Afghanistan under the thumb of the Taliban, Syria, you know, it's been an ISIS hotspot and a hotspot for goodness knows what other terror groups for, frankly, as long as I can remember now. Why do you think there is even a question of the fact that we should potentially wave people through without an interview, just fill in a 10-page questionnaire?
Exactly, 40 questions and you've got a free pass. It's absolutely ridiculous. This should not be happening. And, you know, rather than saying, do you know what, we've got a massive backlog, so here you go, 95% of you, come on in. You need to be getting tougher. The reason why they're coming here is because we are absolutely a soft touch, and we need to be sending out a stronger message and a stronger deterrent. Instead of saying 95% of you come onto England and have all of our resources, what you should be doing, Rishi, is saying, get back in your boats, and off you go. This is not our problem. We need to be sending it elsewhere, and we need to look after our people in our country first, rather than actually ploughing more money that we don't have into something that is already completely and utterly out of control. And it's exactly why we've got the highest record in years.
Why do you think that we accept so many of them? Because the other solution for me on this would be to employ more people to work in our Home Office or our immigration processing centres to try to deal with the backlog that way. That is what I think many people had anticipated that Rishi Sunak would do, which is to try to get more people involved in the processing system to make sure that we can actually process these people. It would appear, if these claims are true, that the opposite is going to be the case. They're almost going to make it more lenient.
Yeah, of course they are they're not just making it lenient, they're making it a free pass. You know, not only that, only one person actually has to come from another country, and then all the rest of the families can come on with them as well. Yes, obviously, you know, it would be at least a starting point if you decided to invest a bit more money into the back system and the processes, because let's not forget, that's completely archaic, a little bit like the rest of our country. But for me, there's one very clear purpose that we need to be having here. Stop this. Stop everybody coming into our country for at least 5 years. Let us recover. Let us recover our policing. Let's recover our healthcare system. Let's look after the country first, rather than going, heck, I don't know what I'm doing, so do you know what? Let's just have a big old free-for-all and hope for the best. It's ridiculous. We're going to see bigger rises in crime, and it's going to cost us even more money. Rishi, you are completely and utterly out of control, and you need to get a grip.
Rebecca, thank you very much. Rebecca Jane, there is the Deputy Leader of UKIP, just reacting to this. Clearly what Rishi Sunak is wanting to say here, it would appear, is I told you I would reduce the backlog pretty much to zero. This is the way that he intends to do it, at least in part. We have around 160,000 people reportedly on an asylum seeker waiting list. According to these reports, around 12,000 of them from countries with a high acceptance rate, and those countries include Libya, Yemen, Syria and Afghanistan. They will essentially be given a questionnaire to fill in and not a face-to-face interview. How do you feel about that at home, ladies and gentlemen? GBviews at gbnews.uk. Later on in the show, I'm going to be talking to human rights activists. They appear to be of the mind that we've got due process and we're accepting an amount of people anyway. A lot of these people are victims of modern slavery as well. The other side of it, of course, is that this is a soft touch and it might actually encourage more people to get here because they know they stand a better chance of getting in. I want your views throughout this. GBviews at gbnews.uk. But sticking with this similar topic anyway, the Home Office has published its quarterly migration figures, which provide an overview of what they call irregular migrants who come to the UK. Now, these do include those arriving on small boats across the English Channel, but there's rather a lot more to it than that. And to pick through this with a fine-tooth comb, we're going over to Dover in Kent to speak with our GB News South East of England reporter, Ray Addison. Ray, thank you very much. So just run us through some of these figures. What do they really tell us, please?
Yeah, good afternoon, Patrick. Well, what we're seeing from the Home Office today with these figures being released is a 60% increase in irregular migration from 2021's figures to last year in 2022. In fact, if you want to go all the way back to 2018, it's a 15,000% increase when there were just 299 migrants who crossed the channel, this so-called irregular migration to the UK. In 2021, it was just over 28,500, and last year it was just under 46,000 migrants. Now, they arrived last year in 1,109 small boats. 87% of those passengers on the boats were male, and 20% were from Afghanistan and 28% from Albania. They made up 48% of the total. Now, of the Albanians that came to the UK last year, 1 in 8 were referred as possibly being victims of human trafficking, and they have to go through a two-stage process to verify that. 90% passed the first round of checks, although I have to say of the second round of checks that number drops considerably down to around about 55%. Now, I've been asking residents here in Dover what they think of these latest stats.
I don't think we happen to have that clip, unfortunately, Ray, but there we go. That's, I think Ray was hoping to do a little bit of a vox pop there with some people about what they think about those latest stats, but we'll have to wait and see, I'm afraid. But, Ray, look, thank you very, very much. It's great to obviously have you on the show. Just to run us through some of those numbers there, that was actually quite a stark insight, I think, isn't it, into the irregular levels of migration, a 60% increase in it. Now, look, we are going to move on from this shortly, but I just want to get your views coming to the fore on this. GBviews at gbnews.uk. Elizabeth wants to know exactly what the 40 questions are going to be, 40 or so questions. This is the news that we led with, which is that asylum seekers are, from certain countries anyway, around 12,000 of them, are going to be given a questionnaire instead of a face-to-face interview. And I just want to know, where does this really end? Because if we do have an acceptance rate of already around 90% when it comes to people coming from Afghanistan and Syria. Now, clearly, there are a huge amount of people who will be genuine refugees from Afghanistan and Syria. We all know what those countries are like. We all know the kind of people who are in charge of them and the terror groups, etc. So, simple matter of fact, there will be a lot of refugees and asylum seekers from those countries. But when it comes to the fact that we don't seem to do background security checks on a lot of people, we don't know who a lot of people are, would it not be a natural additional security layer? And indeed anything. People get interviewed for anything. You get interviewed for jobs. I mean, someone at least checks your ID when you want to go into the pub, for goodness sake, or you want to buy a deck of fags at the local supermarket. Shouldn't we maybe be doing a little bit more with our borders? Have we now got an open border with some countries that are known for terror hotspots? GBviews at gbnews.uk. We will bring you the latest on that as and when we get it, and I do want to hear from you on it. I have to laugh, says Peter. Do we really think that Parliament intends to solve the backlog of illegal immigration? I'll tell you what, Peter, I had hoped that we were going to get more manpower in immigration offices and people doing the backlogs and checking it, as opposed to the big grand plan, it would appear, to me anyway, at least, for Rishi Sunak to clear the asylum seeker backlog, is to basically just go, let's have an amnesty and start again. But the problem with that is if you have an amnesty and people know that you're going to have an amnesty, then more people are going to try and race through that door, aren't they? So it remains to be seen what the illegal immigration figures are going to be for the year ahead, but I suspect they won't be particularly good. We're moving on to Northern Ireland now, though, where 3 men have been arrested after a police officer was shot in Omagh last night. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell is said to be fighting for his life and is in a critical but stable condition. He was allegedly shot by 2 masked men in front of his son and other youngsters as he helped out at a football session at a local football club. Northern Ireland's political leaders, including Sinn Féin and the DUP, have issued a joint statement to condemn the shooting. But GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie is in Omagh for us now. Dougie, look, thank you very, very much. Can you bring us up to date, please, in this disturbing incident?
Yes, well, it was last night about 8 o'clock that this policeman, off-duty policeman, of course, he wasn't a policeman last night. He was a father, and he was here with his son, and they were doing their local training here with the youth club in a football match. And of course, this John was one of the coaches involved in that, as many fathers are. At about 8 o'clock, that coaching session came to an end. He walked out of this arena behind us into the car park, and there, unfortunately, 2 gunmen were waiting for him. They fired at him repeatedly. He was putting stuff into the boot of the car at the time, his young son round the front of the car, and unfortunately they hit him multiple times. There was the miracle of all of this is there was so many children and parents coming to collect those children in the car park at the time. Bullets had ricocheted, hitting other cars in the car park. The forensic officers still behind us now examining the vehicles that's there, taking a very, very close look at those bullet holes, etc. that's in it. And you can imagine if bullets are ricocheting and going everywhere, it is nothing short of a miracle that we weren't looking at children being shot here. But this was very much an execution attempt on this officer. He is a very senior police officer in Northern Ireland and heads up a crime squad that mainly looks at, I suppose, organised crime. So he was taken to Alton-the-Gelvin Area Hospital, and thank God some of the people behind here actually came to his aid and administered first aid and managed to keep him alive until the ambulance arrived and took him to Alton-the-Gelvin Hospital, where he is now stable but still critical. This town itself of Omagh, we're about 3 miles outside it, of course, was known as one of the worst terrorist atrocities ever in the UK in 1998. That Omagh bomb that hit here 3 months after the Good Friday Agreement was signed. This town in particular is picturesque. It's a lovely place to visit, but it has its ghosts, and today you could feel it in the community here. You can feel it in people coming past, that they remember that day. It brings it back to them, and to have the likes of this on their doorstep once more is not very comforting at all. And the police service here are doing their best to bring whoever it was to justice. That will go on over the next few days and weeks until eventually that comes to an end.
Dougie, thank you very, very much. Dougie Beattie there, bringing us bang up to date when it comes to that disturbing case. We'll bring you more info as and when we get it, of course. Right, OK, look, coming up, ladies and gentlemen, I've got it all for you. Sir Keir Starmer, he's on a mission, actually 5 of them to be precise, and they are bold. Yes, are you intrigued? Well, OK, I will be back to tell you all very, very shortly. Don't move.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different. Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates. Do you not believe in prison?
I don't believe in prisons.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit off.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by 2 of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.
Virgin Media Channel 604.
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236.
And YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio.
With the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, welcome back. Now, before today, you might have been clueless as to what Labour would actually offer if they won the next general election. But fear not, because Sir Keir Starmer, well, he's enlightened us all like the Dalai Lama. In a speech today, the Labour leader has pledged to make the UK the fastest-growing economy in the G7. Now, it sounds good, but can he actually deliver? He's also gone big on how he wants Britain to have a zero-carbon electricity system by 2030, which I'm sure will keep you all on the edge of your seat. And, of course, he also wants to have a dig at the Tories as well. He's rattled off things like improving the NHS and much, much more. Here's what Keir Starmer had to say.
They're devoid of ideas. They're clapped out. They're divided. Too weak to challenge the vested interests in their party, which hold Britain back. Too closed in on themselves to think big for our country. Britain needs leadership with ambition, belief in the possibilities of the future, hunger to take on the big challenges. This is the case for change. A new government and a new way of governing. Britain needs both. With Labour, Britain will get both.
All right, well, there we go. That was Keir Starmer. He's rolled his sleeves up, so you know he means business. But joining me now is political strategist and former advisor to Tony Blair. It's John McTernan. John, thank you very much. Sustained highest growth in the G7. I could have been listening to Liz Truss then, couldn't I?
No, because there's no mad ideas like cutting tax, spending loads of money at the same time, no spooking the markets. Labour are the party of sound money. Labour, the party of sound finance. Keir's made it clear every Labour spending promise will be matched with details on how we will pay for things. And the thing is, after the wasted decade of the 2010s, we're now partway through a second lost decade under the Tories. We have to switch government so we can switch to growing.
All right, John, I can hear people shouting at their TV screens now going that we might have had a wasted decade, but that was because the Tories had to clean up the utter financial mess that Labour left them with. But now you're saying Labour are the party of sound money and sound finances.
Absolutely.
I think people might be...
Absolutely.
Right, so, but how? Because, I mean, the track record isn't great, is it?
Look, we'll be inheriting an economic mess in which many of your viewers and listeners are paying higher mortgages, what's called the moronic risk premium, the result of the Truss and Kwarteng budget. You know, and the Tories can't run away from the fact that they have put Britain in this terrible situation. Keir's been clear, Rachel Reeves been clear. It will take a decade to sort this. It'll be hard work at first, but the commitment is very, very strong to making us the fastest growing economy in the G7. And your viewers and your listeners know there's nothing lacking in Britain in talent. It's the lack of talent in the government that's the problem.
OK, so he's already asking a second term. So he's already saying, judge me in 10 years' time. But people want results now, I think, John, don't they? And people...
They'll get immediate results from a Labour government, but there's no point in trying to fool people. People know it has taken 12 years to wreck this country. It is going to take time to rebuild it.
OK, I mean, I think, look, John, to be fair, it wasn't... this country hasn't just been wrecked in the last 10 years, has it? But can I just ask about the improving the NHS thing? I mean, some of these are particularly vague. I do say that in the sense as well that Rishi Sunak did a 5-point plan that you could condense into 3. So they're both at it, right? But the improving the NHS system, I mean, how's he actually going to do that? Because he doesn't really want to give nurses and people a proper pay rise, so that's not going to happen. I mean, I dare say Labour... I mean, the NHS is supposed to be their sacred cow. Is he just going to have to slaughter that sacred cow?
He said two things that are really clear already. One is they're going to use some money from the non-DOMs. So non-DOMs are going to pay more tax, which I think is a good thing. Maybe Rishi and his wife don't think that, but I think
how much does that raise, John? John, how much does that raise, John?
On recruiting British doctors and British nurses.
OK, John, but how much money is that? How much money is that? What does taxing non-DOMs more actually raise?
We'll need to find out when we're in the Treasury. We've got a commitment to funding 20,000 new doctors and nurses out of it already, and we've been given a figure, I think, by Jeremy Hunt when he refused to raise the taxation. So we're talking about billions.
I get that, but just want to drill down into this because non-DOMs, yeah, all right, they won't pay all of their tax over here, they'll be abroad. That's kind of the definition of it. I understand that. But they will also have significant business interests and significant wealth here, and they will be paying, every single time they get a monthly paycheck, they will be paying for umpteen numbers of people already in our NHS. And if you want to tax them even more, they might just move away completely and we won't get any of that money at all. And if you want to do that without being able to actually tell anyone what the figure is that it's going to raise, people might go, well, actually, that is unfunded. You just told me everything was costed a minute ago. It's not, is it?
I said every proposal in the manifesto will be fully costed, but it's 1.7 billion pounds that can be raised by the non-DOM tax reform, as far as I can remember. The point is, there's also a commitment to reform access to primary care. So we actually use the full range of people who can give you services and treatment, so you don't have to go to your GP as the only doorway in. You can use pharmacists. Use pharmacies much more creatively. They're already used for the vaccination program, for vaccination against COVID and the booster program. There's lots of ways we can actually make the system work better, more efficiently, in a way that's more friendly towards the patients. There's lots of improvements we can make in the NHS that can improve efficiency and productivity, and that's the key about this, isn't it? Getting more for the same money, or even more for less.
Just one last one. Nowhere in his Big 5 missions does it say anything about immigration, either legal or illegal. I mean, you were obviously an advisor under Tony Blair. Some people would argue he started this whole mess.
Yeah, well, look, Tony Blair, and I'll never apologise for this, Tony Blair made Britain such a booming economy, such an attractive place to be, the greatest country in the world. Of course, people want to come and live and work here. It's a great country. It was a greater country under Tony Blair, a greater country under Keir Starmer. But people want to come and live and work in Britain, and they should be welcomed and bring the skills they have. But on stopping the boats, we're going to see this year, there's no way that this government can stop boats, because they've got to give a legal migration channel, a way to come to Britain legally, and that needs to be done, because there are refugees who have a strong association with our country through history, recent events, and they should have a right to come and apply.
Surely, if Labour wants to win the Red Wall back, he's got to put illegal immigration in his top 5 priorities, and he's not done that, John.
The Red Wall is back. The Red Wall is back. When we get 50% of the country saying that we're going to vote Labour, the entire country is becoming a red wall again. The blue wall has gone red. London's gone red. The Northwest has gone red. The Northeast has gone red. The predictions are, the Daily Telegraph had a prediction with the Tories having fewer seats than the SNP. I think the problem at the moment is the government just need to get out of the way of the new Labour government. Keir's setting out his plans today. There'll be more detail during the year, and let's hope there's an election during this year.
All right, John, always enjoy our back and forth. Thank you very much. John McTernan there, former advisor to Tony Blair, political strategist as well. It's strong stuff. Do you agree? Do you disagree with a lot of that? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Well, here's a question, OK? Here's a question. Do you live in the divorce capital of the UK? We're going to talk about all things relationships and find out as well what the leading cause of rows in the home actually is. I've got a clue for you. I've got a few of them right here in the studio. But first, it's your latest headlines with Rhiannon.
Patrick, thank you. It's 3:30 for your top stories from the GB newsroom. 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following the shooting of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell Enoma. He was targeted by 2 masked gunmen while he was with his young son at a sports centre last night. He's in a critical but stable condition in hospital. Police say the primary focus is on dissident Republicans, the new IRA, and they're now reviewing the threat level. The number of asylum seekers waiting for an initial decision on their claim has hit 160,000. That's the highest level since records began. The figures come as the Home Secretary tells GB News in an exclusive interview that nothing's ruled out when it comes to tackling illegal immigration. More than 45,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats last year, which Suella Braverman describes as unacceptable. Speaking to our Liam Halligan, she also said she understands why people are frustrated with hotels housing asylum seekers.
It's clear that we have an unsustainable situation in towns and cities around our country whereby, because of the overwhelming numbers of people arriving here illegally and our legal duties to accommodate them, we are now having to house them in hotels, and that is causing understandable tensions within communities, pressures on local resources.
And you can watch the full 22-minute interview with the Home Secretary on the GB News YouTube channel. And Sir Keir Starmer has outlined his vision for the country if Labour were to win the next general election. Launching his party's 5 national missions, the Labour leader says the UK needs to be more competitive. The economy was highlighted as a top priority, and he promised to be tough on crime. TV, online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Don't go anywhere. Patrick will be back in just a moment.
OK, people, I want to go to the inbox and then tell you all what I've got coming your way shortly. So lots of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on the story we were leading on today, which is that some 12,000 asylum seekers to the UK are being considered for refugee status without any sort of face-to-face interview. So currently, there obviously is a process, but there's also a massive backlog. We've got roughly about 150,000 people awaiting it, and clearly everyone's aware of the issue with hotels and the cost of the British taxpayer running into the region of around £2.1 billion a year. So Rishi Sunak got on his soapbox and he said, I've got my 5 plans here, which you can condense into 3, but there we go. One of them is to stop the small boats. He also wants to reduce the asylum seeker backlog to pretty much 0. So he's got to find a way of either importing or deporting around 150,000 people. And as we all know, we seem to be allergic to deporting anyone in this country, so he's got to find a way, clearly, of allowing them to stay. And it would also appear now that what he's going to do is remove the interview process, so no face-to-face interview, and he's going to present people with something like a 10-page booklet of a variety of different questions which they can then answer, and some boffin somewhere, probably a computer, I would imagine, will decide whether or not these people can have the privilege of living in Britain. So the other interesting aspect of this is that these countries include places with an already high acceptance rate. And those countries include places like Afghanistan and Syria. Afghanistan, of course, being literally run by the Taliban, and Syria pretty much up for grabs with whoever has the most guns and bombs. So is it actually a reasonable thing, or do we now essentially have an open border with 2 terror hotspots? gbviews at gbnews.uk is that email address, and Jim's got on it. Jim says, seems like there's no point in even needing a passport to come to this country. I can understand the Home Office is inundated with claims, but no face-to-face interviews Seems like a recipe for disaster. I'm inclined to agree with you there, Jim. Janine says, so they hope that these asylum seekers will help with employment crisis. We had tens of thousands across the channel last year alone, and we're still struggling to fill the jobs. Well, this is another argument to it, because they're saying at the minute these people can't get jobs because they're in the asylum process. So once they were allowed out into society, they could get jobs and the taxpayer might have to stop paying for them. But I would be really keen to see the numbers on this, because if people are coming in or in genuine refugees, OK, and genuine asylum seekers, then I would imagine it would take them quite a while to get onto the employment ladder. I don't imagine they'd be able to necessarily pay their own way initially, and we could all understand that, obviously, if people have come from nothing and are fleeing something absolutely terrible. But that does also mean, then, that the taxpayer is actually having to foot the bill, and that, let's be honest, is if we just take everyone at face value as well, which I think not a lot of people are inclined to do. Michelle says, this government is handing over the country to whoever enters. We voted Brexit to get Britain back. This is not Britain. This government hasn't got a clue. Well, how do you all feel today, then, just on that particular note that you've raised for me there, Michelle, which is that Rishi Sunak's grand plan to slash the asylum seeker backlog, some would argue, appears to be just to make it easier for people to be waved through, which isn't much of a master plan, is it? Keir Starmer's issued his big 5 promises today. We heard from a former advisor to Tony Blair earlier on there. And Keir Starmer's top 5 plans and his promises, his pledges, don't improve or include, I should say, anything in relation to migration. He's got highest growth. He's got making Britain a clean energy superpower, improving the NHS, reforming the justice system, raising education standards. So there you go. But obviously nothing about, from what I could tell anyway, about migration, illegal or indeed legal. Time for one more before I tell you what I've got coming up. John says, when do we, the British taxpayer, get a questionnaire on whether or not thousands of migrants should be let in without any interviews? My concern is that this is pretty obviously a recipe for disaster, and that if we just play the tape forward on this, at what point is the government... If the government's really asked at the moment several key questions, like how many adults are there studying in schools, in secondary schools, how many fully grown adults are there pretending to be children in schools, it obviously can't answer, otherwise they wouldn't be in those schools, but they don't know a huge amount of the time. And then you say, well, how many people who've committed a terror offence or a murder or something abroad are here now, maybe even under a false name or a different name, and they don't know? Do we know the criminal backgrounds of a lot of people? And they say, well, we don't really know. And this, I think, is enough to get people quite angry. But yes, keep your views coming in. We are going to move on now because we've got loads coming your way. You just can't keep Prince Harry out of the news, that's right. Though, of course, him and Meghan just want to be left alone, don't they? Our actual Defence Secretary has slammed Prince Harry now, and you love to see it. I will also be revealing where the highest divorce rate in the UK is. So if you had a blistering row with your husband or wife earlier on, then fear not, you are not alone. It is you and countless others. And also, I bet you can't guess what the top reason for a domestic argument is. It's not what you think, but I'll tell you in 2.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
The guy went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Co.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Co. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
All right, OK, so not content with alienating two completely different continents, now Harry and Meghan are, well, they're back at it again because the Defence Secretary is the latest person to weigh in and publicly criticise everybody's favourite prince. Military man Ben Wallace has said that Prince Harry boasting about killing 25 Taliban fighters undermines the nature of the army as a team game. Well, the Duke of Sussex has already received a barrage of criticism for revealing these details, and he's even been mocked by Taliban leaders. I do actually think there was some elements of humour in the fact that Prince Harry managed to unite both the Taliban and ordinary members of the British public in their visceral disdain for him following his release of that book, Spare, or as I'm calling it, Where, as South Park did. Let's get the views of former senior military intelligence officer and co-founder of the Independent Defence Authority. It's Philip Ingram, MBE. Thank you very much. It's nice to have some, I would argue, proper near royalty on this show, given the individual that we're about to talk about. But yes, look, Ben Wallace has waded in now, saying that it undermines, Prince Harry boasting about how many Taliban fighters he slotted, has undermined the military. Do you think it has?
No, not in the slightest. And Ben Wallace clearly hasn't read the context of it in the book because, Prince Harry put it in the right sort of context. Prince Harry is a sick individual. He's clearly got post-traumatic stress disorder. What he needs is help. He doesn't need this sort of criticism. And for Ben Wallace to put himself in a position where, in effect, he is picking on one veteran, it sort of undermines Ben Wallace's credibility as the Secretary of State for Defence. In the same interview, he goes on to criticise Johnny Mercer, the Minister for Veterans, and puts him down by just describing him as a junior veteran with only 12 staff, whereas Ben Wallace has to look after 224,000 people. I think that puts Ben Wallace's personality into context rather than Johnny Mercer or Prince Harry.
Well, let's take that angle then, actually, because I think a lot of people are a bit bored about talking overtly about Harry, although we will return to him in a second. But in the veterans issue now, I've been banging on about it for a long time. We covered yesterday on this show that Johnny Mercer wants to end veteran homelessness by the end of the year. I think that's a cause we can all get behind. Ben Wallace has here overtly dug out Prince Harry, who is a veteran, and appears to have cast some shade onto Johnny Mercer. I mean, do you think our own Defence Secretary doesn't care too much for veterans?
I personally believe he doesn't care too much for veterans because he's not putting all of the effort in. He doesn't really seem to care for people. He is a very, very good statesman-like politician. He's very good in the international stage. He's very good at projecting his image out. But when it comes to marking his report card inside the Ministry of Defence, you just have to see debacle after debacle after debacle. You've got the army with its Ajax in a fighting vehicle that's costing the taxpayer £5.6 billion for nothing being delivered. You've got the Red Arrows and your two pilots having to be sacked, the commanding officer being removed from post, and nothing's happening at the hierarchy of the RAF. You've got HMS Prince of Wales with severe engine problems, all delivered during Ben Wallace's time, and Ben Wallace is sitting there smiling and trying to deflect things by criticising Prince Harry and criticising Johnny Mercer.
Hang on a minute. I mean, do you think that maybe you and Prince Harry should team up and call for Ben Wallace to resign? Do you want Ben Wallace to resign?
Well, I'd happily team up with Prince Harry and suggest that Ben Wallace actually focuses on doing his job a little bit more internally and looking after the people in defence, because it's quite clear he's not doing that. And part of looking after the people in defence is looking after veterans and making sure that Veterans UK is in a position to look after them, because that comes under his remit. Johnny Mercer, unfortunately, doesn't have control of it. And I think if it was given to Johnny Mercer to look after the veterans in the country, would get a much better service.
I mean, it's fascinating stuff, to be honest with you. I mean, do you think that Ben Wallace might have been out on his backside if it wasn't for the fact that there was already a war on when the latest reshuffle happened?
Well, He could well have been. But what is needed is that statesman-like piece that he's very, very good at. He's very good at going into Ukraine, in dealing with our European partners, in doing the wider diplomatic stuff. But he's not good, and he's not good at getting his staff to sort what needs to be done inside the MOD itself.
I'll just ask you one last one. We will return to the Prince Harry stuff. Being honest, though, should Prince Harry have revealed how many people he killed or even spoken about it? I've spoken to a lot of people in the armed forces. They say that's not the done thing, it's a bit taboo. And to be fair, I mean, the Taliban have all but put a fatwa out on him, and presumably anyone British as well.
It's not really the done thing. I took it as part of a cry for help, part of a self-destructive program for him. And actually, it's those senior military people openly criticising him that have put a bigger target on his back and polarised the Taliban more than what he said in the book. They wouldn't have known about it if other people hadn't come out in false horror to say this is terrible. I don't think it really matters one way or the other.
I happen to have it on good authority, Philip, that the Taliban are avid listeners to Prince Harry's Audible book, and no doubt would have been anyway. He is massive in Kabul, massive in Kabul. But look, thank you very much, Philip Ingram, there, MPE, who is, of course, a former senior military intelligence officer and co-founder of the Independent Defence Authority. Yeah, copies of Prince Harry's book Where were flying off the shelves in Kabul, ladies and gentlemen. It really was an explosive read. New figures, though, published by the ONS have revealed that the UK's top regions for divorce. Right now, this is it, people, OK? So, do you know that just under half of couples get divorced now? As somebody who's just got engaged, this doesn't bode well, but at least I don't live in Norwich, which is apparently the top divorce city. So it's got a divorce rate of 12.8%, but that is higher, apparently, than the national average. And reasonable behaviour is the #1 reason for people getting divorced. I mean, it's never reasonable behaviour, is it, to be fair? Adultery being responsible for around 14% of marriage breakups, and the average UK divorce rate, and this is what I was talking about, is estimated at 42%. So 42% nationally, and if you believe what you read here, let's just round it up, 13% of people in Norwich will be divorced. I've got some interesting stats here as well about the age range of this, but I'll go into those shortly. I also want to reveal to you the top reasons why people argue in the home. But I'm joined now by divorce coach Sarah Davison. Sarah, thank you very much. I mean, this is pretty bleak. I mean, as somebody who is potentially about to get married, will you just advise me not to?
Well, no, absolutely not. This isn't for everybody. So people listening, if you don't panic, it really doesn't matter if you do live in one of these areas. Honestly, if you have a good relationship, you've got good communication, you're going to be okay. It's for those people that aren't communicating and that there are problems festering. That's where you can learn from this and maybe do something now to avoid that.
Can I ask, before I talk about some of the rows at home, what does a divorce coach entail? I mean, what do you do?
Yeah, it's an interesting job title, right, Patrick? I help people to cope better with any kind of breakup. So the emotional roller coaster that you go through, and also the practical challenges that you face. So maybe becoming single again, moving home, becoming a single parent, confidence issues, especially if you're coming out of a toxic relationship as well. How to take your power back, recover, learn the lessons from the past so that you can go on and move forward and be happy again.
OK, now I've got a list here of the top reasons why there are rows in the home, OK? And #1 is not turning the lights out after you've left a room, apparently. #2 is not wiping down kitchen surfaces even, I should say. So, yeah, the not turning the lights out thing I can definitely relate to. Leaving wet towels lying around, 17%. What to watch on the TV? I can believe that, although that argument is sorted if they just watch GB News, to be fair. But, yeah, how should people try to make sure, frankly, that they, with the best will in the world, don't require your services and don't get a divorce without one of them just turning into an absolute doormat?
Absolutely. I think it's about communication. Everybody is different, and it's about acknowledging your differences, not trying to sweep them under the carpet and not allowing things to fester. Hopefully, if you say to your partner, I find it irritating that you're dropping your towel on the floor, then in a healthy relationship, that other person should then respond to that by making an effort at least to hang their towel up more often than not. So again, it's working together. And I think that's the basis of any good relationship, is getting that communication. not allowing those problems to be swept under the carpet, because that is the biggest challenge I see, Patrick, with people coming to me saying, there's been a lot of issues for a lot of years. I didn't want to bring it up because I don't like conflicts. I wanted to avoid that. So I've said nothing. But now, it could be one small thing that breaks the camel's back. So again, addressing those issues, planning around them, absolutely.
Now, Norwich has the highest divorce rate compared to any other area in the UK, with a staggering 12.8. We're rounding it up, 13%. Following Norwich, we've got Hastings and then Blackpool, with both 12.1%. I mean, I don't want to cast aspersions onto any of those places. I don't know whether waking up in Norwich, Blackpool or Hastings has got anything to do with the fact that you want a new life. But the average length of marriage in the UK at the time of divorce is 12 years. It's not a bad run, a 12-year marriage, considering you've probably been dating for a few years before then as well. And the UK divorce age average for women is 43.9, and for men it's 46.4. I've got a producer here, actually, who will remain nameless, who's just turned 46 and a half years old, although he never married. So I suppose he's out of that cushy window now. But is that the age when people decide, look, I still got a bit of life in the old dog yet, I'm sick of the way you breathe in the night, I'm going to try my luck with Sandra from next door?
Well, yes, it could be. I mean, there's all sorts of reasons that this happens. But I think, like you say, 10, 12 years, you change a lot in that period of time. You're not the same person that went into the marriage. Often, if you've had kids as well, the dynamic will have shifted. And we change over time. That time, you're talking about mid-40s. Again, you're getting to that age where you're thinking, right, what's next? I'm approaching 50. What's life going to look like? So a lot of people do reevaluate their life. If kids are leaving, again, that can be a big part of when people break up. It's called empty nesting. When they leave, the kids leave, they go off to university or go off and get jobs, then suddenly you're left staring across that breakfast table with someone thinking, what actually do we have in common now? Because we used to do all the things for the kids. Now what do we do? So again, there's so many reasons. But going off with Sandra from next door, maybe take some time to think that through, because quite often the grass isn't greener.
Lovely stuff. Sarah, thank you very, very much. I really enjoyed that. Sarah Davison there, who is a divorce coach, just reacting to the terrible news to the people of Norwich that, yes, look around you now, the people of Norwich. The next time you're at a dinner party, OK, you'll see the people there. Well, you just know that 13% of you are not going to be a couple in the next year, but we always like to keep it light here on GB News. With that in mind, I can't believe I'm saying these words. Ladies and gentlemen, GB News could be about to be the home of boxing. Yes, your favourite TV channel is in talks to bring you a fight between two true political heavyweights in more ways than one. Brave Brexiteer Lee Anderson and the protesting Ramona Steve Bray, hard to tell which side we're on, isn't it, could settle their differences in the ring. So the rivalry between Lee Anderson and Steve Bray hit new heights last month when the Tory MP stole Steve Bray's hat. What I did like about Steve Bray fighting back is that he kept a fag in his mouth the whole time while he did it. This is a fight between two absolute legends, though, isn't it? The fight could take place on the River Thames. OK, so it'd be the Thriller by the river, next to the Westminster Jungle, a rumble in the Westminster Jungle, and experts are already billing it. Yes, that's right, the Thriller on the river. But I want to know this afternoon, OK, which major political figures do you want to see go head-to-head in a boxing match? We need an undercard, OK? I mean, you know me, people, I'm a lover, not a fighter. I've offered to be the MC. I even offered my services as a ring girl, because it's a modern world and I could identify as a woman for the day, presumably. I think most people will be hoping it doesn't go beyond round one. Otherwise, you'll have to see me walking around with a placard wearing a bikini. But there we go. I want to know who you think should be on the undercard for Lee Anderson, Steve Bray, which is a boxing match which we are apparently now actually doing here at GB News. There we go. Right, moving on now. Here's what I've got coming up for you, lovely people, the other side of this very short break. With around 160,000 people waiting to find out if they will be granted asylum, we're going to have a hot debate on whether or not the government's new idea to essentially wave a load of them through and potentially give us an open border with a couple of terror hotspots is indeed a good idea. I'll see you in a couple of minutes.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, right across the nation. You can get us on television, on radio, on digital. We're absolutely everywhere.
Amazing. You see, amazing.
You remind me of me in the European Parliament. But here's the most important bit. We are not part of the mainstream establishment. We think and speak just like you do. We are the People's Channel.
Magnificent. That's really, really thoughtful.
Come and join us on GB News, the People's News Channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prisons. I'm completely stunned.
I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's 4 o'clock, ladies and gentlemen. You're with Patrick Christys right here on GB News, and I've got a big hour coming your way. Is Britain about to have an open border with terror hotspots? It looks like Rishi Sunak's master plan to remove the asylum seeker backlog is to just wave tens of thousands of people through. Leaked plans show there will be no face-to-face interviews, just a questionnaire, which, I mean, that's lovely, isn't it? And these will go to people from Afghanistan and Syria, which is expected to garner at least a 95% acceptance rate. I mean, it is being called an asylum seeker amnesty, and I can understand why. Moving on. Is the IRA back? 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after a police officer was gunned down in front of kids in Northern Ireland. We'll bring you more from our exclusive interview with Suella Braverman as well, the Home Secretary. Find out why she's got some very, very harsh words for the Met Police. That'll kick off. And GB News could be about to be the home of boxing. We can confirm that we are in talks for an actual boxing match between two political heavyweights in more ways than one. Deputy Chairman of the Tory party, Lee Anderson, and annoying Remainer protester, Steve Bray. So, yes, this is actually a thing that's happening. Get your suggestions for who should fight on the undercard coming in. We've already had Farage versus Blair, and I think we'll have to go and speak to the big guy, won't we? So keep those coming in. Email me, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Look, one serious one. Should we interview every single asylum seeker face-to-face before we let them live here? Less serious, which two people do you want to see fight on the actual undercard of Lee Anderson and Steve Bray? Anyway, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Now is your headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Good afternoon to you. It's a minute past 4. I'm Aaron Armstrong in the GB newsroom. 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following the shooting of a high-ranking officer in Omagh. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was targeted by 2 masked gunmen while he was with his son at a sports centre last night. He's in a critical but stable condition in hospital. Police say the dissident group, the new IRA, is the primary focus, and they're now reviewing the threat level. Chief Constable Simon Byrne told reporters a respected colleague is fighting for his life.
Clearly, as an organisation, we are utterly shocked and angered by last night's brazen and calculated attack. John is a father, husband and colleague, and a valued and active member of his local community. John's colleagues are understandably extremely distressed by last night's shooting. However, they remain resolute and committed to bringing those responsible for this heinous crime to justice.
Well, former police ombudsman for Northern Ireland, Baroness Nuala O'Lone, told GB News this will bring back memories of a darker time in the history of the province.
This shooting of Mr. Caldwell is something exceptional, though, and it seems to be connected with the fact that he's a police officer, and that means that every police officer who got up this morning and put their uniform on will have reflected. Every police officer going out to work will have reflected, what does this mean to me and their children and their spouses and their parents, their siblings. Everyone will be saying what's going on.
The number of asylum seekers waiting for an initial decision on their claims hit 160,000. That's the highest level since records began. The Home Secretary's told GB News in an exclusive interview, nothing is being ruled out when it comes to tackling immigration. More than 45,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats last year, which Suella Braverman describes as unacceptable. Speaking to Liam Halligan, the Home Secretary says she understands why people are frustrated with hotels being used as temporary accommodation.
It's clear that we have an unsustainable situation in towns and cities around our country, whereby, because of the overwhelming numbers of people arriving here illegally and our legal duties to accommodate them, we are now having to house them in hotels, and that is causing understandable tensions within communities, pressures on local resources.
And you can watch the full interview, exclusive interview with the Home Secretary on the GB News YouTube channel. Now, Sir Keir Starmer has outlined his vision for the country if Labour were to win the next general election. Launching his party's 5 national missions, the Labour leader says the UK needs to be more competitive. The economy was highlighted as a top priority, and he promised to be tough on crime. Sir Keir says sticking plaster politics is holding everyone back.
The pattern is always the same. Distracted by the short-term obsessions that fixate Westminster, held back by a cynicism which uses low trust in politics as an excuse to narrow our ambitions, blinkered to the potential of an active government setting the direction, we lurch from crisis to crisis, always reacting, always behind the curve. A sticking plaster, never a cure.
4 people have been arrested after a huge Ukrainian flag was painted outside the Russian embassy in London. Hundreds of litres of yellow and blue paint were poured onto the road, representing the country's colours across some 500 square metres. A protest group led by donkeys has claimed responsibility, saying the flag marks the first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And glowing tributes have been paid to the legendary football commentator John Motson, who dies aged 77. Gary Lineker described him as England's voice of football for generations. Known as Motty, he became synonymous with the beautiful game and indeed his sheepskin coat during a distinguished 50-year career with the BBC. He covered 10 World Cups, 10 European Championships, 29 FA Cup finals, extraordinary, before retiring from the organisation in 2018. Finally, the Queen Consort appeared to speak out against the censorship of Roald Dahl's books as she made her first public appearance since recovering from COVID. She told a room of authors and literary figures to remain true to your calling, unimpeded by those who may wish to curb the freedom of your expression or impose limits on your imagination. Camilla was joined by King Charles at Clarence House earlier for her book launch, marking the 2nd anniversary of her online book club, which is aimed at bringing people of all generations together, people who share a love of reading. This is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, but now it's back to Patrick.
OK, I've got lots to get through, and we start this hour with the government's latest plan to tackle the massive migrant backlog. Now, it's not much of a plan, if you ask a lot of people, because currently there are more than 160,000 people applying for asylum in this country, which is costing me and you, everyone we know, a reported £2.1 billion a year. And the authorities desperately need to clear that backlog. Rishi Sunak has hung his hat on it. He said, I want to stop the boats. It's the only bit of jeopardy that he had in his 5-point plan that you can condense into 3 points, isn't it? I want to stop the boats, I'm going to clear the asylum seeker backlog. And everyone was like, OK, all right, Rishi, well, how are you going to do it? Are you going to put more staff there? Are you going to find a way of managing to facilitate more people to check the asylum seeker backlog? No. What he wants to do is scrap face-to-face interviews with thousands of asylum seekers and ask them to fill out a questionnaire instead. And it's thought that about 12,000 people from Afghanistan, Syria, Eritrea, Libya and Yemen who have already applied for asylum in the UK will be eligible under the policy being launched from the Home Office today. A couple of major issues with this, which is that we already apparently have around a 90% acceptance rate with people from Afghanistan and Syria. It's expected, according to some reports, to rise to 95% if, indeed, this questionnaire system is brought in, which would lead me to ask the question, have we got an open border with Afghanistan and Syria? The plans aim to speed up the process for people from nations that typically have a high grant rate, as I've just said. Joining me now is the Director for the Centre of Migration and Economic Prosperity. It's Stephen Wolfe. Stephen, have we got an open border with 2 terror hotspots?
Well, you've got an open border if this policy is going to go through with what it says, with 5 countries, Afghanistan, Syria, Eritrea, Libya, as well as the Yemen. And of course, each of those countries have their own political issues. There's terrorism in them. There's people who are fleeing war and torture as well. So they're going to be mixed into the whole bag. But what it does mean very clearly is the concerns I expressed on your show about Rishi Sunak's policy just a few weeks ago was that his plan to reduce the backlog would mean that we'd have clearing people through without any proper checks. And here is today proof that for 12,000, he's seeking to clear them straight away without face-to-face. And that's an open border with these countries. It's a failure of our system to monitor people properly, and it will only bring problems in the future, unfortunately.
But look, the idea was that Rishi Sunak was standing there saying, oh, he's going to be strong on illegal immigration. But actually, this is quite possibly the weakest policy we've ever had, isn't it?
Well, it's worse than the Labour Party's policies in 2000, 2001 and 2002, where you had over 135,000 people allowed into the country at that time because they opened the doors on a similar strategy. So if there were those people in the Home Office then and they were doing it now, you wouldn't see any difference. It's very weak. It's very dangerous to allow this to happen. And all it will do now is send an incredible message to the people smugglers. Massive message is, give us your money, you're in.
Yeah, and that is the message, isn't it? So Rishi Sunak wants to implement something, according to reports, that would basically help to wave a load of people through at the same time as wanting to stop the boats. Well, why would the boats stop if people think as long as they can get here, they're in?
Well, there won't be any stopping of the boats now. What we'll see is an increased intensity to have those routes that are used from Afghanistan. And I've seen drone footage of open-back lorries being piled with people in Afghanistan, paying the Taliban $50 to get their first part of their trip across the borders into Turkey. And then the bases in Turkey expanding to get people here to the UK. And that's what's going to happen.
But
it
Stephen,
will increase very rapidly.
Can I just ask you on that? Because a lot of people will have just picked up on what you said there and be thinking, well, hang on a minute. If the Taliban, the actual Taliban, is helping to get people on their first leg of the journey to the UK, what does that say about just some, of the people who might be over here?
Well, we won't be able to know who they are, but it's obviously we've seen dangerous people arrive in the UK. We had that unfortunate murder in Bournemouth recently from an Afghanistan who claimed asylum. We've had the terror attempt in Liverpool from somebody, and of course also the murder of the MP. So there are going to be bad actors who are there. There will also be some decent people too, as we know, Patrick. You've seen that and you've heard that yourself. But what it does mean is that there is involvement with those people in Afghanistan, is involvement with those who are on the people smugglers. There are those involved in the drug trafficking trade, all profiting from getting people from those countries. And this policy will just give them more advantages as a big marketing ploy.
Stephen, one of the big annoyances for the British public is the cost to the taxpayer. £2.1 billion a year, roughly, it is currently costing us with this asylum seeker backlog. And the government would probably argue, well, if we clear that backlog, then it stops costing the taxpayer money. The theory being that these people are then free to go and live and work around Britain. How likely is it, do you think, that these people will be working and self-sufficient within a couple of years?
Well, let's be clear about this. That number of 2.1 billion I don't recognise in any way, shape or form, Patrick. It's much too low. Just the fees that we pay for housing to the three companies, Mears, Serco and Clear Homes Limited, is 2 billion a year for their 10-year policy. Then we have 6 million a day on hotels, which is another 2 billion. Then we have 350 million just for those receipts of the income that we give to the asylum seekers on a weekly basis. That's 4.5 billion. Then we've got the legal fees, then we've got legal aid, then we've got the border force, then we've got the costs in the Home Office, the health, the education. The costs in our estimates is around 8 billion a year. And there is absolutely no way allowing these people to come and work in low-paid jobs, which most of them would do in, say, the building industry, taxis, or even if you get them into retail, is ever going to repay those sums of money at all. It's nonsense.
No, and I just don't see how this stops anytime soon. Stephen, can I just finish with a slightly off-field question before we move on to Ray Addison, who's got some really interesting numbers, actually, on different immigration figures. We are, and I'm as amazed about this as you probably are as well, we are apparently going to host a fight between Lee Anderson and Steve Bray here at GB News. And both parties are pretty keen on it. Yeah, I know. Both parties seem pretty keen on it. I've offered to be either a ring girl or the MC, the Let's Get Ready to Rumble guy. We want suggestions for people who should be on the undercard. Who would you like to see fight each other from the political world?
Well, I would definitely like to see a battle between Sturgeon and Nigel Farage.
Oh, get in. Back of the net. Yeah, exactly. I think Sturgeon would fight dirty. Right, Stephen, thank you for being such a good sport as well. Thank you very much. That's Stephen Wolfe there, Brilliant. Director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity. Right, back to slightly more serious matters now, and we are sticking with that topic of migration because the Home Office has published its quarterly migration figures, which provide an overview of what they call irregular migrants who come to the UK, including those arriving on small boats across the English Channel. And with us now to mull over, to ruminate on these figures, we're going live to Dover to speak with our GB News South East of England reporter, Ray Addison, who has the latest. Ray, yes, thank you very much. What are the latest figures? What's going on?
Hi, Patrick. Well, we're seeing a 60% increase in the number of irregular migration migrants who've travelled across the Channel to the United Kingdom since 2021 and 2022. In 2021, it was just over 28,500, and last year it was just under 46,000 people. If you go all the way back to 2018, only 299 migrants made that treacherous crossing at that time. So last year we had 1,109 small boats make that journey to the United Kingdom from France. Now, 87% of their passengers were males, and 20% were from Afghanistan and 28% from Albania. So those two countries making up the vast majority, 48% of those who came here. Now, 1 in 8 of all of the Albanian migrants who made that journey last year were referred as possibly having been trafficked, victims of human trafficking. And there's a two-stage process to that to check the validity. 90% passed the first check, but so far only 55% have passed the second round of checks, although it has to be said that the vast majority of those who were referred are still to receive that second assessment. Now, of course, with this dramatic increase from 2021 to 2022, I've been speaking to people here in Dover to get their reaction to the stats.
Need to understand why they're making that treacherous journey, why they, feel the need that they have to put themselves and their family at risk, and sort of help out the root and cause of the problem rather than just counting the numbers of who come across successfully or who don't even come across successfully.
I don't understand why so many men, no families, but obviously on their own, are coming here. They're not fleeing war, a lot of them, and they're just economic migrants, actually.
I just think it shows the conditions they must be living in,
how difficult it is to get proper asylum over in the country. There's 2 countries on our asylum list that we allow over. So I just think it shows, I mean, the danger of crossing and the conditions and what they're paying to cross just shows the desperation of them and how difficult it must be where they are. And I think we need to set up a better immigration system.
So, Patrick, we know from stats released earlier as well that there's 166,000 migrants on the asylum claim backlog. Now, Rishi Sunak back in December said that he would eliminate over half of that number and get it all resolved by the end of the year. Remains to be seen whether he manages to achieve it.
Yes, thank you very much, Ray. Ray Addison there has been out and about for us in Dover, reacting to those latest figures. Lots to go at today when it comes to that kind of stuff, isn't there, really? Which is the news that essentially people are going to be, well, waved through. That's the argument. People going to be applying for asylum here and not being given a face-to-face interview, and those are from countries such as Afghanistan and Syria. Lots of people in the inbox about that. Get your views coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. Do you think that everyone who applies for asylum here should be given an interview, really? But we're moving away from that for a minute because we're going to go to Northern Ireland, where 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after a police officer was shot in Omagh last night. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell is said to be fighting for his life and is in a critical but stable condition. He was shot by 2 masked men in front of his son and other youngsters as he helped out at a football session at a local football club. Northern Ireland's political leaders, including Sinn Féin and the DUP, have issued a joint statement to condemn the shooting. But with us now is GB News' Northern Ireland reporter Dougie Beattie. He's in Omagh. Dougie, thank you very much. What's the latest?
Well, this attack was a very targeted attack. John Caldwell was a very accomplished police officer. The squad that he headed up took on many, many high-profile cases. And if you think about this, this was very targeted. They knew exactly when he would be vulnerable, when he wouldn't be carrying his personal protection weapon with him. And of course, that was when he was here with his son, being a family man. At about 8 o'clock last night, the training session behind us here in the youth centre was over. The young children were coming out to meet their parents in the car park behind us. And at that point, when Mr. Caldwell was going to the boot of his car to put equipment into it, his son was just at the front of his car. 2 masked men came out of the shadows and gunned him down. They fired multiple times at him, hitting him many times. He was so very, very lucky that the people here ran to his first aid to him, and that possibly could have saved his life. It was then that he was transferred to Altnagelvin Hospital, where he is stable but critical. The man is fighting for his life. Omagh, as a town, of course, has had its problems in the past. In fact, it is a beautiful area, but it is the scene of the worst ever terrorist atrocity on the British Isles, and that was in 1998 when terrorists struck. But you can't help but feel this was a much more targeted and precise attack and aimed at the man himself.
Dougie, thank you very, very much. Dougie Beattie there, who's live there in Northern Ireland for us following the shooting of that police officer. Right, I've got a lot more coming your way. Our economic and business editor, Liam Halligan, he's sat down for an exclusive interview with Home Secretary Suella Braverman. Stay tuned, because actually we've got an unseen clip from this. There was some material that hit Nigel Farage's cutting room floor last night. We've picked it up. We're going to run with it. Oh, and just get your suggestions coming in, people, as well, for which 2 politicians you want to see fight on the undercard of the fight that we are apparently hosting between Lee Anderson and Ramona Steve Bray. My favourite one so far is Penny Mordaunt versus Angela Rayner. There's one non-political suggestion, which is Meghan Markle versus Princess Anne. And I think we can all agree we'd love to see it. gbviews@gbnews.uk. See you in a tick.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle.
Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akue, Saturday and Sunday afternoons on GB News. Expect fiery debate and passionate discussion as me and my panel tackle some of the biggest topics hitting the headlines. It's a place for everyone's opinion. No one gets cancelled, but no one gets an easy ride.
Oh, she's on it today!
Be ready for conversations that are fierce, frank, and of course, fun. Every Saturday and Sunday afternoon from 4 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel.
We are GB News, and we'd like to say thank you to each and every one of you for bringing us your conversations, for helping our great nation find its voice. We are here for you on radio, television, and online, across England, Scotland, Wales, and Northern Ireland.
It's not the BBC, you actually get your facts right.
We are proud to be GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back, wonderful people. Now, earlier this week, our economic and business editor, Liam Halligan, sat down for an exclusive interview with Home Secretary Suella Braverman, and Liam spoke to the Minister about the case of former Met Police officer David Carrick, who's been jailed for life after this month, after pleading guilty to 48 rapes. We've got a little clip from that now, I believe.
It's unforgivable, and that's why it was right for the Met Commissioner to be very forward-leaning in his apology to the victims and actually to the broader public for the shattering of confidence that cases like David Carrick or even Wayne Couzens have brought about. And I think what we need all to do now is look forward. We need to ensure that we rebuild confidence. I know the Met Commissioner, Sir Mark Rowley, wholly understands that challenge and is not shying away from the enormity of that challenge. It's about reviewing data and ensuring that we root out any officers who are not fit to wear the badge. It's about improving our standards that we apply to vetting and recruitment. And it's about ensuring that ultimately the public have confidence in our police.
Yeah, well, I'm pleased to say that Liam Halligan actually joins me now, our economics and business editor. And Liam, it was a wide-ranging interview, that wasn't it? Focusing, in that clip anyway, on a response to some elements of the police force.
Yeah, I was with the Home Secretary in her office, in the Home Office, for half an hour. It was her first full sit-down television interview as Home Secretary. We talked a lot about the Northern Ireland Protocol, very much at the top of Rishi Sunak's in-tray at the moment, about the small boats issue, which you've been covering, Patrick. And GB News viewers and listeners can see the whole interview on our YouTube channel and the GB News app. But what you've done this afternoon is you've picked out some parts of the interview that are less newsworthy, but also very, very interesting. So I quizzed the Home Secretary about the tragedy of Nicola Bulley. Of course, Lancashire Constabulary has been accused of releasing inappropriate information about Nicola when she was still feared lost. Her family were obviously very worried about her. Now, of course, unfortunately, a body has been found. And the Home Secretary said she wanted to not comment on the Lancashire Constabulary's behaviour about that investigation because an internal investigation was undergoing and she didn't want to prejudge it. But then I asked her about David Carrick, as you say, the Metropolitan Police officer who's been given 36 life sentences because of his behaviour in the police. Behaviour which some police officers have said since was happening in plain sight. And the Home Secretary said that public confidence in the police had been, her word, shattered by this scandal. She called on the head of the Met, Mark Rowley, who, of course, replaced Cressida Dick, to steady the ship. And she said she was aware that he was steadying the ship. But pretty still pretty strong words there for what is Britain's biggest and most important police force at a difficult time.
No, absolutely strong stuff, and no doubt the police will be listening very, very keenly. What was her general mood and demeanour like, Liam? There's been rumblings earlier on in the week about her considering her position, for example. What was she like? Did she seem quite settled to you?
Well, just to give me an interview at a time like this when there is such contentiousness around the Northern Ireland Protocol, a lot of the Tory backbenchers, especially the European Research Group, which she used to chair, are concerned about the ongoing role for the European Court of Justice in Northern Ireland. Northern Ireland staying within the EU single market. That's a court which our own Home Secretary calls politicised and expansionist, grabbing power in her words. As a lawyer, she's offended by that ongoing situation post-Brexit. And she was basically in this interview firmly warning the Prime Minister that I said, would you resign? She said, this is not the time to talk about resignations, Liam. But then she proceeded to talk to me about the last time she resigned over Brexit, when she was a junior Brexit minister in 2018. Look, Suella Braverman comes across as a very, very nice, very gentle woman. She is as hard as nails when it comes to the issue of constitutional law and particularly Brexit. She did used to run the ERG. She is the only so-called Spartan in the cabinet. The Spartans were the 28 Tories MPs who repeatedly voted against Theresa May's deal 3 times in a row. Jacob Rees-Mogg, he wasn't a Spartan. Ian Duncan-Smith, he wasn't a Spartan. Boris Johnson, he wasn't a Spartan. The Spartans are the real hardcore of the ERG. And I think history will judge, without the Spartans, Brexit in this form simply would have not happened. And she is the flag bearer for those people in the government. Rishi Sunak has to have her in the cabinet in order to keep that part of the Tory party under control. A part of the Tory party which, at a whim, could remove the Prime Minister from power.
Well, yeah, and in fact, it was that part of the Tory party that was, at least behind the scenes, making quite a lot of noise earlier this week. You did ask her a little bit as well, didn't you, I think, about the Channel boat crisis as well, and the hotels and the public backlash that's taken place there. And I thought her response to that was quite interesting, actually.
It was. Of course, the small boats issue is a really big deal. When she had a stand-up, she had a 90-minute stand-up row with Liz Truss when she was Prime Minister because Liz Truss was trying to push her to ease immigration controls in order to boost growth. Suella Braverman went absolutely no way, and she ended up, resigning from office, partly being kicked out, partly resigning in the final moments of Liz Truss's premiership. But even Rishi Sunak got her back as Home Secretary 6 days later because he knew he had to have her in there to keep some of the backbenches under control. It is power. And the Home Office is about to lay a bill before Parliament which does toughen up immigration law. For instance, it proposes that if you arrive here undocumented, you are immediately deemed illegal. There's no chance of you being classified as an asylum seeker. The Lords will push back against that. Of course they will, that sort of ermine-clad chamber of legal aid. And so what Suella Braverman wants to do, she wants to keep on the table the nuclear option of leaving the ECHR altogether, leaving the jurisdiction of the Strasbourg court. The ECHR, of course, for many people, a sacred text, which, of course, British lawyers and MPs drafted in the shadow of the Second World War. We were the first country to ratify it. Only Belarus and Russia in the Council of Europe countries aren't signatories to the ECHR. She's got the stomach to leave the ECHR if it means that she solves the small boats problem. The question is, has the Prime Minister?
Well, this is it, look, Liam, thank you very much. And by the way, in case you're wondering, you can watch that full interview there. It's 22 minutes long. It's with Suella Braverman, as we've been talking about. That's available on our GB News YouTube channel. I mean, there's loads of clips of it as well all over Twitter, so make sure that you get on that. And I must say, Liam, I was loving the way you described Suella Braverman there as a Spartan, hard as nails and all of this, given the fact that we are currently trying to plug the undercard for the GB News fight that apparently we're covering, which is Lee Anderson versus Steve Bray. Maybe Maybe she could come and do it. You should do it. She's hard as a coffin nail. Anyway, right, thank you very much. Liam Halligan, our economics and business editor. Right, moving on. Face-to-face interviews, they could be out. Questionnaires, they could be in. For thousands of asylum seekers in a bid to cut the soaring backlog, we'll also debate that in a few minutes. Yes, where do you stand on that? Have we got an open door policy now with a couple of terror hotspots around the world? I mean, it wouldn't surprise me. Would it surprise you? But up next, right now, in fact, is the headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
It's 4:32. Good afternoon to Aaron Armstrong here in the GB newsroom. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell remains in a critical condition after being shot in Omagh last night. The DUP leader, Sir Geoffrey Donaldson, says political leaders in Northern Ireland are sending a clear message of unity in their condemnation of last night's shooting and their support for the police. 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after John Caldwell was attacked by masked gunmen with his young son at a sports centre. Police say the primary focus is on dissident Republicans, the new IRA, and they're reviewing the threat level. The number of asylum seekers waiting for an initial decision on their claim has hit 160,000. That's the highest level since records began. The figures come as the Home Secretary tells GB News in an exclusive interview nothing's been ruled out when it comes to tackling illegal immigration. More than 45,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats last year, which Suella Braverman describes as unacceptable. Speaking to Liam Halligan, she also says she understands why people are frustrated with hotels housing asylum seekers.
It's clear that we have an unsustainable situation in towns and cities around our country whereby, because of the overwhelming numbers of people arriving here illegally and our legal duties to accommodate them, we are now having to house them in hotels. And that is causing understandable tensions within communities, pressures on local...
And you can watch the full 22-minute interview with the Home Secretary on the GB News YouTube channel. The Queen Consort has appeared to speak out against the censorship of Roald Dahl books as she launched a project today. The new club aims at bringing together people who share a love of reading, and Camilla, who was joined by King Charles at Clarence House, told a room of authors and literary figures to remain unimpeded by those who may wish to curb your freedom of expression. It's her first public appearance since recovering from COVID. TV online and DAB plus radio, this is GB News. Now, back to Patrick.
Well, we're going to debate this question next, OK? We've got 2 great guests lined up. You do not want to miss it. And that question is whether or not we should interview every single asylum seeker that wants to come into the UK. Because from where I'm sitting, it looks a lot like Rishi Sunak is about to wave a load of people through and indeed maybe even introduce an open door system with at least two terror hotspots. How does that make you feel? Big debate coming your way very shortly.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment.
I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story. We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel. OK, welcome back, everybody. Back to our top story today now. Face-to-face interviews for thousands of asylum seekers could be scrapped in favour of Home Office questionnaires in a bid to cut the soaring backlog of cases, which is definitely one way to try to cut the backlog, isn't it? The plans aim to speed up the process for people from nations that typically have a high grant rate, although it might surprise you which nations they are. It includes Afghanistan and Syria, which, of course, are known terrorist hotspots. It's thought there are currently more than 160,000 outstanding asylum claims, and there have been questions raised over the Prime Minister and Home Secretary's claims that channel migrants are gaming the system. Well, it does come as well, and this is interesting, as the Home Office announced that 85% of all small boat migrants' modern slavery claims, so those people who come over here on the channel on small boats claiming to be victims of modern slavery, 85% of their claims are found to be legitimate. Well, joining me now is former Chief Immigration Officer at the UK Border Force, Kevin Saunders, and I've got human rights campaigner Fraser McLean. Great stuff, both of you. Thank you very, very much. Kevin, I will start with you. Do you think that if Rishi Sunak gets his way and we don't have interviews for asylum seekers, that we would essentially have the best part of an open-door policy with some known terror hotspots?
Well, I've got to say, Patrick, when I was first told about this morning, I had to check that it wasn't the 1st of April, quite honestly. I was, I suppose, a little bit surprised that we're operating this policy. And I've spent the rest of the day trying to get stuff out of the Home Office. And in the end, I've got 28 pages about it, which is incredible. Absolutely incredible. And some of the figures that are being bandied around are just plain wrong. I see that some media outlets are saying 95% of these people get asylum, which is actually totally untrue. Less than 8% get asylum. The others get something called humanitarian protection because we can't remove them. So, you know, it's nonsense for some of these figures to be quoted because they're just plain wrong. And this modern slavery business is under review because this is being totally, absolutely mishandled. It's a complete mess, this modern slavery business.
All right, Fraser, I'll bring you in. Quite a lot for you to go out there. Your views?
Yeah, well, it shouldn't come as any surprise because this is the government's fault. Those of us in the human rights sector, I think, have probably been misrepresented to an extent. We want a bureaucratic structure that works, really. And this hasn't worked for some time. The Home Office's budget in 2018 was 25% less in terms of day-to-day spending in real terms as it was in 2010. And this is the result. It's an organisation under Suella Braverman that can't handle current-day pressure.
Yeah, but should they not interview people face-to-face, Fraser? I'll stick with you on this. You know, should it be a case of we now send a questionnaire around to a load of people from Afghanistan and Syria and say, do you want to come here? And basically, I presume if they answer yes, then they pretty much get in, Fraser. I mean, people do have massive concerns about this.
Yeah, they do. I think, to be honest, it would be ideal if we treated everyone the same. The fact the government feels they have to do this is just indicative of how much the Home Office is struggling under their leadership. And it comes from funding and it comes from poor ministerial governance from Suella Braverman and Robert Jenrick. They took responsibility for a number of young people in hotels, 200 of which have gone missing. I was at a briefing by Kent Police yesterday. They told us that already some of those children have been found forced to work in cannabis farms. So, you know, it comes back to good governance and it comes back to a lack of it under this government.
Fraser, just on that, sorry, and we'll go back to Kevin in a sec, but I'm just aware of a point that you've made there, and I don't want to forget it. Are they definitely children, Fraser?
Yeah, so of the 200, 188 or something were Albanian. A vast majority were young men under the age of 18.
And we know that because there's issues, isn't there, with certainly, for example, you know, adults being put in schools recently. Do we absolutely know that these people going missing from hotels are indeed children, Fraser?
Well, that's what the police told me, so you'd have to ask them. I think Kent police are a trustworthy source, but there we are.
Fair enough. All right, Kevin, I'll pick up back on you now, because you raised something there that I hadn't really heard too much about before. The figures when it's being bandied around about 95% being granted asylum, or 85% of the people who are coming across the channel now who are being granted modern slavery, basically, their claims have been found to be legitimate. You appear to be disputing them, Kevin. What's that about?
Well, it is. It's wrong. It's basically wrong. If you actually dig into the figures, you'll find about 8% actually get asylum. Others get leave to remain. It's called humanitarian protection because they've come here, they've thrown their documents away, we have no idea who they are or where they've come from, and therefore we can't remove them. Okay. So we're stuck with them. Right. And so they're stuck in the system, and we have to do something. We're not going to grant them asylum, so we have to give them this thing called humanitarian protection.
Kevin, can I just ask you, what kind of questions are people asked in an interview, and what kind of questions would you expect them to be asked on a questionnaire? So if I've just arrived, you know, from Afghanistan on a dinghy across the Channel, etc., and you know, I would traditionally at some point have been interviewed by someone, presumably. What kind of thing would I be asked?
Right. Well, they'll go through a whole pile of things. They'll ask you name, address, where you've come from, your religion, why you've come to the UK, what's caused you to leave your home country, where are your family, why have you come and they've stayed at home? You know, why is it dangerous for you but not for them? And things all things along that line.
Okay. And we because I just don't understand why we have to now devote all this time to a questionnaire. Why can't we just get more people maybe to actually interview these people? I mean, that would seem...
Well, basically, what you've got to remember is we're only interviewing people who arrived before the Borders and Nationality Act came into force, and that was what, 20-something of June last year. So we're interviewing the legacy people from Afghanistan, Eritrea, Libya, Syria, and the Yemen, who we know that we're going to be stuck with. So we can do it by paper, basically.
Fraser, I'll bring you back in because there are those figures, aren't there? That's 85% of people who are coming over the Channel who claim to be victims of modern slavery are actually successful in that application. I mean, what do you make of that? Because I think some people do find it quite hard to believe that if someone paid somebody thousands of pounds to travel somewhere, that they would then be the victim of modern slavery.
Well, this is where the debate has been completely lost, and it was just lost in the last answer that was given there. You asked about slavery, and immediately the answer was given about asylum. They're different. They're different matters. A very small proportion of people coming over are being referred to for slavery claims. The Tories have said a lot of these claims are being fake. The statistics that came out about modern slavery referrals this morning denied that claim, put a huge dent in it, which means that the new modern slavery laws that were brought in 2 weeks ago are now already obsolete, not that they were legitimate in the first place. So already this debate has been totally muddled. I mean, it's pretty appalling governance, and it's deliberate blurring of the rhetoric to tarnish anyone who, for whatever reason, is coming in.
OK, just to clarify, both of you, because I've got to move on, so it's pretty much a yes or no answer to this, but I just wanted to make sure we got this clear. We have got very much two sides on this debate, so we've obviously got the former border force angle there, and we've got the human rights angle. And as far as I'm aware, neither of you think it's a particularly good idea to scrap a face-to-face interview and introduce a questionnaire. Is that right, when it comes to our borders? Yeah. So we haven't got a point. Yes. Right, so Rishi Sunak has managed to alienate both sides of this argument with his policy, which I think is fascinating. Both of you, thank you very much.
It's bad government.
Well, you're not wrong. You're not wrong, to be fair. We all agree that. Thank you very much, both of you. Right, OK, that was former Chief Immigration Officer at UK Border Force, Kevin Saunders, and Human Rights campaigner Fraser McLean. I liked that. I enjoyed it. Anyway, we'll hopefully do a bit more of that later on in the show. But Sir Keir Starmer has told us all of his plans for our great nation, and he's calling them his 5 missions. And he's aiming high. He wants to make us the fastest-growing economy in the G7 and reform the police and justice system to make our streets safe again. The Labour leader also criticised the current government for their sticking plaster politics approach and called the Conservatives clapped out. Let's have a quick listen, shall we?
Devoid of ideas. They're clapped out. They're divided. Too weak to challenge the vested interests in their party, which hold Britain back. Too closed in on themselves to think big for our country. Britain needs leadership with ambition, belief in the possibilities of the future, hunger to take on the big challenges. This is the case for change. A new government and a new way of governing. Britain needs both. With Labour, Britain will get both.
Right, joining me is former Labour advisor, it's Scarlett Maguire. Scarlett, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show. Yes, there you go. Well, what do you make of that? I mean, he's aiming relatively high, isn't he? And certainly the economic one will please everyone. I was listening to it live and he was basically saying that... pretty much did say you're all going to be richer under a Labour government.
Yeah, I mean, I think what he said is we've got to change. Is what's happening at the moment isn't good enough, and actually instead of having, as he calls it, sticking plaster policies that will just get us through to the next 3 months, is we've got to look to the future, and we've got to actually have some serious aims. And the first one about economics is that we are going to grow faster than any other country in the OECD. Now, to do that, you've got to invest. You've got to have good business, but you've also got to have good public services. I mean, it is highly ambitious. And at last, we've got somebody who says, "No, I'm not talking about tomorrow. I'm talking about when I get into power, and actually, the next 10 years."
Well,
and I think it's great.
Well, in a way it is, Scarlett, but, I mean, he's basically saying if you wait a decade, if you hang on for 10 years, you'll see the results of the things that I'm talking about today. And people don't want that, Scarlett. Come on.
Hold on. What he's saying is we can talk about what we're going to do when we get in. We can talk about the first 100 days, right? We can show that we're a government that's going to do. But actually, what you also want to know is that we're a government that has a long-term plan. And it's frankly about time we had a long-term plan instead of, changing prime ministers all the time. And what we need is the only way you can fix the economy is to do it long-term. Right? And the only way that you can sort out, the green stuff is to do it long-term. You can't go on saying this will make it a bit better. This will make it a bit better.
Well, he says he wants
actually how to look at it in the future. Sorry.
But is he actually thinking long term? Because I think if he was thinking long term, he wouldn't want to actually alienate all the rich people, which is what he appears to be doing. Because he's going to say, "Oh, we'll tax the non-doms to high heaven. We'll tax people who are way up the ladder." All right, well, they will all leave the country, and then we will not have any of the tax at all that they offer. And so when he talks about things like fixing our NHS. Well, the solution to that, from an individual I had on before, a former advisor to Tony Blair, was to tax non-doms to help fund our NHS, which is nowhere near enough money, and then they will all leave. And when it comes to the education system, he wants to make it harder for people to go to private school, essentially. I mean, these actually aren't long-term solutions, are they?
Hold on. Let's get this straight. At the moment, the non-doms, which means that people who live here but don't pay tax here, right? And they pay 30,000 quid, and that's all they have to do. And what we're saying, and frankly, the Americans have been doing this for decades, if not centuries, is if you live here, you pay your taxes here, and that's straight. And actually, lots of people want to live here. The very rich really like living in London, right? And the thing about private schools is all they're saying is that private schools should not have a tax break, is that private schools should pay VAT just like any other business. And that's all they're saying. They're not saying don't send your children to private school. And frankly, the private school fees have been going up massively without this. And the pupils haven't been coming down. I mean, an awful lot of people over the last 10 years can no longer afford to send their children to private school because the fees are so big, because a lot of them is about attracting the children of non-doms.
OK, I mean, the private school I went to was around 40% kids on either a bursary, half or a full bursary. So, to be fair, that's not true, is it?
There are bursaries, but actually there are an awful lot of kids. All we're saying is, sure, if you want to send your child to private school, that's fine. But we think that that doesn't mean your school should have a tax break. Is your school should pay taxes just like any other business. And that money needs to be spent on the 93% of children who do not go to private school, where we really, really need to make the schools better, to introduce more drama, more football, more everything like that.
Oh, come off it. Scarlett, you're not going to solve our education system by introducing more... Sorry, would you mind just putting that knife down and do some interpretive dance for me, please? I mean, come off it. It's not going to happen, is it?
Hold on. The problem with our education system is not boys carrying knives, right? One of the problems of our education system is that it's actually too narrow, it's too focused on the academic, and what you want to do is you want to give far more kids an opportunity to shine, and so you do want dance and drama. There's nothing wrong with dance and drama. Education isn't just about book learning, academic things. Education is not just about getting to Oxford and Cambridge. Education is about understanding learning, and education. It's the beginning. It should be a beginning of something, and not say, oh, well, you're not bright enough to do all of this, so really you're a failure. It's actually, most children have some talent, and that talent is not necessarily academic, and it's trying to get the talent out.
All right, and that's going to be the big Labour plan. Scarlett, thank you very much. Always a pleasure. We could have spoken all day about these points. But Scarlett Maguire there, who's a former Labour advisor. Right. OK, even the Queen Consort, moving on, is giving her take on so-called sensitivity readers editing the words of author Roald Dahl. We touched on this last week, didn't we? Now, she's been hosting a lovely literary gathering where she appeared to wade into the row about Roald Dahl, which appeared to go down well with the audience. And yes, we were reporting about the fact that some words have been cancelled in Roald Dahl, hadn't they? You couldn't call Augustus Gloop fat. He was now just enormous. I would rather be called fat than enormous, I think. But joining me now is someone who's definitely neither fat or enormous. It's Cameron Walker, our royal reporter. Cameron, what did Camilla have to say?
Yeah, sure, you're too kind, Patrick. Yes, right. I mean, she very much seemed to take a very strong stand on free speech and against cancel culture. So let's just take a little look at what she said.
Please keep doing so, and please remain true to your calling, unimpeded by those who may wish to curb the freedom of your expression or impose limits on your imagination.
Right. Yeah, Patrick, this is quite unexpected because clearly this comes very soon after. In fact, it was the end of last week, The Telegraph revealed that a number of words and phrases in the Roald Dahl children's books had been changed. So, for example, as I think you actually said, Augustus Gloop is no longer fat.
No, he's not fat.
Mrs. Twit is no longer fearfully ugly. The speech the Queen Consort was giving today was in front of a lot of very distinguished authors in this country. In Clarence House, she was celebrating 2 years of her reading room, which is an Instagram-like online community encouraging more people to read. But I think it was very interesting, the fact that someone quite as high profile as the Queen Consort, clearly in a position of power as consort to His Majesty the King, who was also watching this speech live in Clarence House, I think was quite a statement. She was very careful not to specifically refer to Roald Dahl. However, I think it was very much implied, and you have to draw the conclusion that she is very much free speech, the Queen Consort. She's in favour of free speech and not being cancelled for perhaps slightly offensive words.
Yeah, good. This is the kind of stand that we want them to make. Thank you very much, Cameron. As ever, Cameron Walker there, our royal reporter, bringing you bang up to date with Camilla's stand for free speech. And we've only got about a minute left, so we do have some huge news. Huge news. GB News could become the home of boxing. Yes, your favourite channel is in talks to bring you a fight between two true political heavyweights. brave Brexiteer Lee Anderson and the protesting Remainer. You can't tell which side we're on here, can you? Steve Bray could settle their differences in the ring. Both parties are bang up for this. They've been giving us a taster. They've been teasing it for quite a while now. They've had numerous scraps. Lee Anderson, of course, hit new heights when he nicked Steve Bray's hat. Steve Bray didn't manage to actually spill a single little bit of ash from his cigarette there whilst he was desperately trying to claw his cap back. The fight could take place on the Thames, the River Thames, next to Westminster, and experts are already billing it the thriller on the river. Which doesn't quite... It's not quite there, is it? There's got to be another one. There's got to be another one in there somewhere. But I want to know this afternoon, which major political figures do you want to see go head-to-head in a boxing match? gbviews at gbnews.uk. I've picked out my favourites so far. Get your emails coming in. We've got Farage versus Blair. Fantastic. Truss versus Abbott. Not sure I fancy this Truss's chances there. Rayner versus Raab. OK. Boris versus Lammy, David Lammy. Now, that'd be good. That would be great, actually. I'd like to see that one. Penny Mordaunt versus Angela Rayner. Rayner's popped up a couple of times. My favourite one's not from the world of politics. It's Meghan Markle versus Princess Anne, which I just think would be absolutely tasty. And I think my money would be on a second-round stoppage from Princess Anne. Anyway, right, look, get your ideas coming in. In the next hour, we will ask if migrants should be granted asylum if they just have to fill out a questionnaire. I basically think we're about to have an open-door migration policy with some terror hotspots. Stay tuned.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216,
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus Radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. for Gloria Meets. In exclusive interviews, I'll be finding out who our politicians really are and what they really think.
It's something that you would never want anyone to suffer.
I didn't know what channels there were. I didn't think I'd be believed.
I must have weighed about 7 stone and I'm 5'8".
My instincts was to sort of cover this up. I mean, clearly that was a mistake.
Join me every Sunday at 6 p.m. on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday on GB News, it's Bev Turner Today from 10 a.m. We're going to be here for you, our GB News family, to keep you up to date, but also make you smile.
There's a guy who went from puberty to adultery.
And I can't wait to bring a few of my own opinions.
I have no time for cultural totalitarianism.
We'll engage in passionate, but always polite debate, with your thoughts and opinions at the centre of it all. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions those days are gone, I can tell you. She's only teasing. Go on. He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
Yes, hello, it's 5 o'clock. We are live at 5, people. You're with me, Patrick Christys, here on GB News, and this is what I've got coming up in the next hour. Thousands of asylum seekers are to be sent Home Office questionnaires, which could be used to decide their claims in a bid to help cut the soaring backlog of cases. Could this effectively create an open door between the UK and countries which, by the way, include Afghanistan and Syria? Well, the backlog has to be sorted, and it's soared over 160,000, but does the government need to take this drastic action? I'm going to be listening to the views of you, wonderful people, our viewers, on this. And is the IRA back? 3 men have been arrested now on suspicion of the attempted murder of Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell after he was gunned down yesterday evening in front of children in Omagh. Defence Secretary Ben Wallace has weighed in on criticising Prince Harry following his admission about killing 25 Taliban fighters, and he said that it undermines the nature of the army as being a team game. I'll be speaking to a retired British Army officer about all of that, and as ever, I want to hear what you think on the big news of the day. What do you think about the fact that the government doesn't really want to interview thousands of people who are trying to come here from Afghanistan and from Syria? GBViews at gbnews.uk. Also, make sure you get your suggestions in for who should be on the undercard of the fight that GB News is in serious talks to host between Lee Anderson and Ramona Steve Bray. Yeah, I didn't believe it either. I did have a word in the office. Apparently it's a thing and we are doing it. So there you go. Who do you want to see fight each other on the undercard of Big Lee Anderson and whinging Steve Bray? GBVs at gbnews.uk. But now it's your headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
Good afternoon. It is 2 minutes past 5. Let's get you up to date with the latest from the GB newsroom. 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder following the shooting of a high-ranking officer in Omagh. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was targeted by 2 masked gunmen while he was with his son at a sports centre last night. He's in a critical but stable condition in hospital. Police say the dissident group, the New IRA, is the primary focus, and they're now reviewing the threat level. Chief Constable Simon Byrne told reporters a respected colleague is fighting for his life.
Clearly, as an organisation, we are utterly shocked and angered by last night's brazen and calculated attack. John is a father, husband and colleague, and a valued and active member of his local community. John's colleagues are understandably extremely distressed by last night's shooting. However, they remain resolute and committed to bringing those responsible for this heinous crime to justice.
Former police ombudsman for Northern Ireland, Baroness Nuala O'Lone, told GB News this will bring back disturbing memories of the past.
This shooting of Mr. Caldwell is something exceptional, though, and it seems to be connected with the fact that he's a police officer. And that means that every police officer who got up this morning and put their uniform on will have reflected. Every police officer going out to work will have reflected, what does this mean to me? And their children and their spouses and their parents, their siblings. Everyone will be saying what's going on.
The number of asylum seekers waiting for an initial decision on their claims hit 160,000, the highest level since records began. The Home Secretary's told GB News in an exclusive interview nothing has been ruled out when it comes to tackling illegal immigration. More than 45,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats last year, which Suella Braverman has described as unacceptable. Speaking to Liam Halligan, the Home Secretary says she understands why people are frustrated with hotels being used as temporary accommodation.
It's clear that we have an unsustainable situation in towns and cities around our country whereby, because of the overwhelming numbers of people arriving here illegally and our legal duties to accommodate them, we are now having to house them in hotels, and that is causing understandable tensions within communities, pressures on local resources.
And there are the details if you want to watch that full interview with the Home Secretary. It is on the GB News YouTube channel. Sir Keir Starmer's outlined his vision for the country if Labour were to win the next general election, launching his party's 5 national missions. The Labour leader says the UK needs to be more competitive. The economy was highlighted as a top priority and he promised to be tough on crime. Sir Keir says sticking plaster politics is holding everyone back.
The pattern is always the same. Distracted by the short-term obsessions that fixate Westminster, held back by a cynicism which uses low trust in politics as an excuse to narrow our ambitions, blinkered to the potential of an active government setting the direction, we lurch from crisis to crisis, always reacting, always behind the curve. A sticking plaster, never a cure.
4 people have been arrested after a huge Ukrainian flag was painted outside the Russian embassy in London. The country's colours were spread across some 500 square metres using hundreds of litres of yellow and blue paint. A protest group led by donkeys has claimed responsibility. They say the massive flag marks the first anniversary of Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Glowing tributes have been paid to the legendary football commentator John Motson, who's died at the age of 77. Gary Lineker has described him as England's voice of football for generations. Known as Motty, he became synonymous with the beautiful game during a distinguished 50-year career with the BBC, covering 10 World Cups, 10 European Championships and 29 FA Cup finals. The sheepskin coat, another item that set him out from the crowd. He retired from the organisation in 2018. And the Queen Consort has appeared to speak out against censorship of Roald Dahl literature as she launched a book project in London today. Camilla made her first public appearance since recovering from COVID to launch her book project as a charity. Now, she's urged authors to remain true to their calling, unimpeded by those who may wish to curb the freedom of their expression or impose limits on their imagination.
Please keep doing so, and please remain true to your calling, unimpeded by those who may wish to curb the freedom of your expression or impose limits on your imagination.
And this is GB News. We'll bring you more as it happens, but right now back to Patrick.
All right, we've got so much to get through. Let's get cracking, shall we? And get stuck into the government's latest plan to tackle the massive migrant backlog. More than 160,000 people are applying for asylum in this country, which is costing me and you a reported £2.1 billion a year. And I think that's quite a conservative estimate. The authorities desperately need to clear this backlog. So what's the government doing about it? Or maybe we could have more people processing the claims. Maybe we could make it easier to deport people. No. They are proposing to scrap face-to-face interviews with thousands of asylum seekers. Just ask them to fill out a questionnaire and then Bob's your uncle, welcome to Great Britain. It's thought that some 12,000 people from Afghanistan, which is, of course, run by the Taliban, Syria, known ISIS hotspot and any other terror group, take your pick, Eritrea, Libya, Yemen, wonderful parts of the world. They've applied for asylum in the UK and they are waiting for a decision. And they will be eligible under the new policy launched by the Home Office to just fill out a questionnaire, no face-to-face interview whatsoever. And if they pass, which a rumoured 95% of them are expected to, then they can come and spend the rest of their lives in Britain. The plans aim to speed up the process for people from nations that typically have a high grant rate, and it has led me to wonder whether or not, and not just me actually, lots of people, we just might as well hold our hands up and say we currently have an open border system with countries like Afghanistan and Syria. So it's a good job we left the EU, isn't it? Earlier on, I caught up with the director of the Centre for Migration and Economic Prosperity, Stephen Wolfe, and he feels that this proposal will only encourage more illegal immigration.
There won't be any stopping of the boats now. What we'll see is an increased intensity to have those routes that are used from Afghanistan, and I've seen drone footage of open-back lorries being piled with people in Afghanistan, paying the Taliban $50 to get their first part of their trip across the borders into Turkey. And then the bases in Turkey expanding to get people here to the UK. And that's what's going to happen. It will increase very rapidly.
OK, there we go. So those are the views of Stephen Wolfe. We have a few experts on today. GB News, though, is, of course, the People's Channel. And I wanted to get your views on this because it will be ordinary people like you who bear the brunt of whether or not this is a good policy. Rishi Sunak stood up, didn't he? And he said, I'm going to stop the small boats. OK, so do you think that by allowing people to have a life in this country by virtue of filling out a questionnaire, we already know that we don't do extensive background checks. Just look, you slipped through the net. There was that chap who was murdered 2 people in Serbia, wasn't there, and had been done for drug dealing in Norway and Italy. He managed to make his way over here and then he stabbed someone to death. So we're not exactly hot on the background checks, and that's an issue. But if we then let people in, where do they come and live? Should we actually be doing more to protect our national security? Is it time that we just completely revealed, essentially, what Rishi Sunak's grand plan is to stop the asylum seeker backlog, to reduce that from the around 160,000 people who are on it? It is not actually to do anything about making it more difficult to come here, about introducing tighter deportation schemes or anything. No, it appears to be to just wave people through. Look, there you go. I've sorted it, ladies and gentlemen. Well, we have a viewer now. It's Alan McNeely from Grimsby, who is a regular on this channel. Alan, you are, a GB News viewer. What's your take on Rishi Sunak's proposed plan anyway, to just let people from Afghanistan and Syria fill out a questionnaire and then supposedly 95% of them can come here and live here for the rest of their lives?
Good afternoon, Patrick. On the surface, it just seems to be absolutely ludicrous, but it depends, I suppose, who they target within this group of 12,000. Is it women and children? Is it families? You know, does that change the dynamic in some way? If they're just letting young, fit men or grown men in with no checks, then they have definitely lost the plot. I was really interested in the two people you had on before the break, Patrick, who were talking about the immigration figures and the fact that maybe, 14% of people actually get asylum. The remainder get leave to remain by this Protection Act, and that doesn't surprise me at all, because we've no way of figuring out who these people are.
Why does it concern you more if it's all young men as opposed to families or women and children, etc.? What is it about that bothers you, do you think?
Well, the question is actually, who are they? What are they here for, and what's their purpose? Yeah, have they come for criminality? Are they potential terrorists that are simply coming into the country to create disruption and mayhem and death? Without knowing who they are, at least trying to find out who they are, we've no way of actually knowing that at all. And the trouble the Home Office have is the common practice where they throw all their documents away. That's why so many are being granted this protection, leave to remain, if you like. Because
what gets me, Alan,
because we don't know who they are.
What gets me, Alan, right, is that you would expect to do an interview if you wanted a job at Tesco's. You would, if you ever travel to America, the border force there is pretty hot. I mean, you can have an actual passport. They can definitely know who you are. They can definitely have a look at all of your background checks. And you still get held up by border force and it feels like you're being interrogated. But as it currently stands, under this, Alan, you could come from a country that is literally being run by the Taliban and you would not actually be interviewed at any point by a human being, it would appear, if you want to actually come and stay here. And do you think that, frankly, that is a massive risk for people?
It's an incredible risk, Patrick. We just do not know what the background of these people are, whether they're fast-tracked or that they slip into the system under the trafficking rules. You don't really know who these people are. And on the trafficking issue, if people have been trafficked into the country, surely the humane, decent thing to do would be to take them back to where they were trafficked from, because they obviously didn't want to come here if they were trafficked. So the first thing to do would be to return them to their families in their country of origin, but that doesn't seem to happen. So I think it's a major risk, a major security risk, and I think that we will live to regret this in the future. Remember, it only takes one person to create absolute mayhem. You don't have to have an army of terrorists. You have to have half a dozen.
Well, and on
that they could do.
On that line, Alan, actually, Stephen Wolfe there gave us a fantastic line earlier on where he says that he's seen evidence and videos that the Taliban are loading Afghans onto the back of open lorries, and that should be a massive concern to anyone, I think, shouldn't it, realistically? I mean, if the Taliban are willing to let these people go, it would imply that maybe they, maybe giving them some orders, for example, which, of course, is, one would hope, just the absolute minority of people. But nonetheless, it's still rather a large risk, I think, to take, isn't it, Alan, when it comes to whether or not the Taliban essentially are actually sending people over here. I mean, we don't really want to leave ourselves wide open to it. The argument, though, Alan, would be that whilst these people are on an asylum seeker backlog, they're probably in a hotel and they're probably contributing towards the £2.1 billion a year bill for the taxpayer. Whereas if we then let them out and say, you can go and get a job and pay into the system, well, that'll be a good thing for the British taxpayer. Do you buy that? Do you think that actually that is a good thing? The argument would be it would get them off the wage bill, as it were.
Well, would it get them off the wage bill? Would they actually get out there and get a job? Or would we release them, allow them to work, and then they just go and claim unemployment benefit? Or simply disappear into the black economy, which must be absolutely massive in this country. So I can understand the reason why they don't want to let them work. I can also see the argument as to, yes, get them out working and get them paying into the system. So it depends. I'm not really sure one way or the other what might be the best thing there. My initial thoughts are they should come, be arrested and be detained.
Yeah.
And to be quite honest, they've got this new policy, haven't they, Patrick, about if you come here illegally, you will not have the right to stay. Well, I would strengthen that policy. I would say if you come here illegally, you will be arrested. The sentence for that entering the country illegal will be 10 years in prison. If you want to put your application in, then fine, go ahead. But it will not be processed till you've served your sentence. And then once you've served your sentence, we're going to get you out of the country to somewhere else because you're not going to stay. So they've got the right idea, but they need to be a lot tougher on it. People have to know that if they come here, that it's not going to be an easy take.
I get that. I mean, the reality, the unfortunate reality, Alan, is that you are probably going to be presented at the next general election with a choice between two major parties, one of whom, Keir Starmer, announced his top 5 priorities today, and within those it would appear that migration, both legal or illegal, is not one of them, and another person in the shape of Rishi Sunak, who... his grand plan, his master plan for getting people off the asylum seeker backlog appears to just be to say, hello, welcome, where do you want to live? Which is a fascinating way of doing it. Alan, just stay where you are for one sec, because I'm putting you on the spot here. This is a different topic altogether. As you may have been hearing with interest, it appears that GB News is going to host an actual boxing match between Lee Anderson and Steve Bray, OK? Who do you want to see on the undercard of Anderson versus Bray, OK? Who do you want to see fight each other is in our political world?
Well, sorry, who do I think should be the backup fight?
Yeah.
Oh, well, the backup fight should definitely be Rayner, and who else have we got?
You just gone straight in for Rayner.
Somebody from the SNP.
Rayner and anyone from the SNP. Fantastic.
Maybe Joanne Cherry from the SNP and Angela Rayner.
Fair enough. Well, there we go. I'm sure there'll be a market for it. Thank you very much, Alan. Great stuff. Alan McNeely there from Grimsby. Yes, and you did hear right. You did hear right. We are hosting a boxing match. Right, OK. Gear change. Now, ladies and gentlemen, very much so serious story this, because 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of murder after a police officer was shot in Omagh last night. Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell is to be fighting for his life, apparently, and is in a critical but stable condition. He was allegedly shot by 2 masked men in front of his son and other youngsters as he helped out at a football session at a local football club. Northern Ireland's political leaders, including Sinn Féin and the DUP, they've issued a joint statement. They're condemning the shooting. But with me now is John Laverty, who's the night editor at the Belfast Telegraph. Look, thank you very much, John. Great to have you on the show, although albeit, of course, under rather depressing circumstances. What do we know so far about what's happened?
Well, what we know is at 8 o'clock last night, DCA Caldwell, who works who does voluntary work as a football coach, was putting his gear away in the car along with his little son when 2 men approached him, 2 gunmen, and basically gunned him down in front of his kid and in front of lots of other people too. Apparently there was nearly about 200 people around there. It was the time that this leisure centre sports complex people were leaving for the night. There were parents arriving. There were lots of kids there. We've been told actually a few of the kids went and hid in the bushes, terrified that they would get shot too. I mean, the one thing about it is a miracle that John is still with us, and thank goodness he is. And I think 99.999% of the people in Northern Ireland are praying that he makes a full recovery, because that was a horrific cowardly incident.
Can you give me a little bit of context about John Caldwell? Because he is very much a big name in the world of policing in Northern Ireland, isn't he?
Yes, he is. I mean, John has been a serving police officer for around 26 years. He started just before the Good Friday Agreement actually was signed, and he worked his way up. And now he has been on our screens quite a lot recently. He's been dealing with another horrific murder, nothing to do with the political situation, the murder of a young pregnant woman. And John was one of the people who was investigating that murder. I don't want to get too much into it, but they have somebody in court for that.
Gosh, OK, goodness gracious me. And look, it has It's a difficult one because there have been arrests, as you well know, which does massively limit the scope of what we're really allowed to say, of course, and we don't want to speculate or anything like that, but there have been fears of some kind of new IRA involvement, as it were. I mean, that is obviously a massive concern, I think, for the wider community in Northern Ireland, isn't it?
Well, it is, because these people have no support. You know, the support for them, if you call it the real IRA, the new IRA, the continuity IRA, all dissident Republicans, they have no support at all. I mean, you can see, Northern Ireland politicians don't agree on much, but they've agreed over the last 24 hours about their utter abhorrence and condemnation of this crass, despicable crime, and it's a throwback to the bad old days. You know, I'm old enough to remember when this sort of thing was happening day and daily, but there's a whole generation of people now in Northern Ireland that this does not happen. And funnily enough, the last time something as serious as this happened was Constable Ronan Kerr in Omagh, the same little town, 11 years ago when Constable Kerr was murdered with a car bomb.
Yeah. John, thank you very much, and hopefully we'll speak to you again soon, although hopefully not under such bleak circumstances, as I've said. John Laverty there, night editor at the Belfast Telegraph. That was John speaking to us after 3 men were arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after a police officer was shot in Omagh last night. Right, next, we are going to talk about Prince Harry, because a government minister, a big beast as well, has accused him of boasting about how many people he killed in Afghanistan and saying that this poses a security threat. I'm going to be talking all about that. And another royal has stood up for free speech. It's about time, isn't it? All of that coming your way very, very shortly.
First and foremost, I am a GB News fan, and I was before I was working here. Just love the fact that we're asking the questions that a lot of establishment media won't ask.
With a bit of a twist, we not only want to inform you, but we want to keep you entertained.
It's worth the drive, because you get in and the team's all ready and waiting, they're itching to go, and it's a proper little family.
GB News is the People's Channel.
It's the audience that makes the programme sing.
We're giving our viewers and our listeners a voice. I see the thousands of your letters, tweets, emails, you name it, coming in.
Britain is broken. How on earth did we get into this mess? But more importantly, how do we get out of it?
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent you.
It's time for something different. It's time for GB News. I'm very patriotic. I believe in Britain. Our best days lie ahead.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Join us here on GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Hi, Andrew Pierce here. Join me every Friday lunchtime for a proper no-nonsense debrief of the week's events. With special guests in the studio and the GB News team on the ground, I'll be getting you up to date with news, some intelligent discussion, and my own sharp take. The weekend starts here with me every Friday lunchtime on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Michael Portillo. Join me on GB News on a Sunday morning for topical discussion, debate, arts and culture, and sometimes even ethical dilemmas.
I don't always agree with you, Michael.
Michael Portillo, Sundays on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
I'm Andrew Doyle. Join me at 7 o'clock every Sunday night for Free Speech Nation, the show where I tackle the week's biggest stories in politics and current affairs with the help of my 2 comedian panellists and a variety of special guests.
Free Speech Nation, Sunday nights from 7 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Here on GB News Live, we'll be keeping you in the picture, finding out what's happening across the country and finding out why it matters to you. We'll have the facts fast with our team of reporters and specialist correspondents. Wherever it's happening, we'll be there from 12 noon on TV, radio and online. GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Patrick Christys, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6. We tackle the day's news agenda like you've never seen before. It's high tempo, high octane, the most controversial topics and the best guests. You will not be able to take your eyes and ears off it. I'm not afraid to ask the questions that you really want answered. 3 till 6 p.m, Monday to Friday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Lawrence Fox, on GB News. Frank,
fun, fearless, and sometimes serious. Much as I love a Friday night punch-up, what I really want is a battle of ideas. I want to look at things differently. I want to hear different voices and engage with your unique experiences. Every Friday at 7 p.m. on GB News.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, the Member of Parliament for North East Somerset and a former government minister. For years, I have walked the corridors of power in both Westminster and the City of London. I campaigned in the largest democratic vote in our island story. I know this country has so much to be proud of. We need to have the arguments, the discussions on how we make it better. The wisdom of the nation is in its people. Vox Populi, Vox Dei. That's why I'm joining the People's Channel. Join me Monday to Thursday at 8 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. Now, loads of you have been getting in touch with your thoughts on the fact that some 12,000 asylum seekers to the UK are being considered for refugee status without any sort of face-to-face interview. This idea is utterly ridiculous, says David from Oakham. Dangerous and solves nothing. There will be all these charities like Care for Calais and dozens of lawyers queuing up to fill these forms in for them to ensure they're accepted. Talking of the lawyers, yesterday we were going quite big on the old Shamima Begum case, weren't we, after she was refused to have her British citizenship reinstated. And what I found absolutely fascinating about that was the legal angle. You've got the lawyers out there going, this is not over. This isn't over, absolutely. And you've got actual members of our actual intelligence services who are coming out and saying, well, privately, albeit privately, here's just a catalogue of absolutely horrific, horrendous stuff that Shamima Begum was involved in. The things that we know about are bad enough, like sewing suicide bombers into their suicide vests in a way that meant that they couldn't get out of them without blowing themselves up, and then that would have led, of course, to the deaths of however many other people. But it's the fact that they could have actually put Shamima Begum herself forward, so she could have done a video link interview, she could have given almost like a character witness for herself. And presumably, these lawyers, didn't even think that the person that they were shilling for would have been safe to protect her own reputation. So that leads me to the conclusion that they don't think that she could be trusted to put her own side forward. And yet they're still there, willing to try and do whatever they can to let this woman back into the country. Remarkable, isn't it? Absolutely remarkable. Is that what you go into the law for, is it? Andrea says, this will only encourage more people to come over illegally. We need to be checking as many people as possible. I really worry for the future, and I'm glad I'm at the latter stage of my life and sorting it out. I mean, to be fair, that is pretty grim, Andrea, that reading between the lines there, you would rather be dead than see the mess that Britain is about to become. So there you go. This is, of course, in response to the fact that several people will just be told to fill in a questionnaire and not given a face-to-face interview. In light of the fact that Rishi Sunak's other priority is stopping the boats, so stop the boats, how on earth will it stop the boats if people can be told by the people smugglers that if you set foot on British soil and you say you're from Afghanistan or Syria, there's every chance that you won't even be asked to do an interview? How on earth are we proving who these people are? Gordon from West Yorkshire says, I can see it now. Thousands of so-called asylum seekers in four-star hotels sat with their feet up on their latest iPhones, calling up all family and friends saying, you need to get yourselves over here, get a free hotel room, free food, free medical care. It's absolutely wonderful. I mean, the other side of this is, once they get out of the hotel rooms, is where do we actually end up putting these people? Because we've seen local councils digging into their own coffers at the same time as they're rising council tax, of course, to now build new homes or rent homes for people. But, I mean, we're talking 160,000 people on the seeker backlog. I mean, it is pretty staggering stuff. That is, of course, the news that face-to-face interviews for thousands of asylum seekers could be scrapped in favour of questionnaires. I want to know what's on the questionnaire. But an immigration lawyer and a Conservative councillor will go head-to-head in just a few minutes. So this is what I've got coming up your way, ladies and gentlemen. An immigration lawyer and a Conservative councillor are going to go head-to-head on that. It's our big story of the day. Loads of you have been getting in touch. And can I just ask as well, another cheeky little plug for you. GB News, it turns out, will quite possibly be hosting a fight, genuinely, between Lee Anderson and Steve Bray. I checked behind the scenes. This is on. So I want to know who you think should be on the undercard of Anderson versus Bray. My favourite one so far is Farage versus Blair. GB Views at gbnews.uk. But now is your headlines with Aaron Armstrong.
It is 5:30. Good evening to you from the GB Newsroom. DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson says political leaders in Northern Ireland are sending a clear message of unity in their condemnation of last night's shooting and in their support for the police. 3 men have been arrested on suspicion of attempted murder after Detective Chief Inspector John Caldwell was attacked by masked gunmen while with his young son at a sports centre in Omagh. He remains in critical condition. Police say the primary focus is on dissident Republicans, the new IRA, and they're now reviewing the threat level. The number of asylum seekers waiting for an initial decision on their claim has reached 160,000, the highest level since records began. The figures come as the Home Secretary's told GB News in an exclusive interview nothing's been ruled out when it comes to tackling illegal immigration. More than 45,000 people crossed the Channel in small boats last year. Suella Braverman has described that as unacceptable. And speaking to Liam Halligan, she understands, she says, why people are frustrated with hotels housing asylum seekers.
It's clear that we have an unsustainable situation in towns and cities around our country whereby, because of the overwhelming numbers of people arriving here illegally and our legal duties to accommodate them, we are now having to house them in hotels, and that is causing understandable tensions within communities, pressures on local resources.
And you can see that full interview with Suella Braverman, the 22-minute version on the GB News YouTube channel. The Queen Consort appeared to speak out against the censorship of Roald Dahl books as she launched her book project today. The new club aims at bringing people together who share a love of reading. Camilla, who was joined by King Charles at Clarence House, told a room of authors and literary figures to remain unimpeded by those who may wish to curb your freedom of expression. It is her first public appearance since she's recovered from COVID. TV online and DAB Plus radio, this is GB News. Now it's back to Patrick.
OK, next, I've lined up a really spicy debate about our top story. It's the government's controversial plans to sort out the asylum seeker backlog. Yes, they're going to wave people through, apparently. They're just going to make you fill out a questionnaire. They're not actually going to interview you. So there we go. And just to top it all off, some of those countries are actually literal terror hotspots. Does that make you feel safe? Do you think that the government is prioritising British people? I'll see you in just a couple of minutes.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, "Nana, stop arguing." I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Join my show Farage, 7 p.m. till 8 p.m. Monday through Thursday. And there you will get opinion, analysis, debate, and I'll cover stories that nobody else dares to touch.
You've been cancelled. Join the club.
Oh, my goodness me. And then for the last 15 minutes, talking pints. We're over a drink. We have a civilised conversation with someone. We very often disagree, but we do it in a grown-up way. Come and join me on Farage.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512,
Virgin Media Channel 604,
Freesat Channel 216.
Freeview Channel 236,
and YouView Channel 236.
You can also take us with you on DAB Plus radio,
with the GB News app and at the website gbnews.uk.
We're absolutely everywhere.
Come join us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
He's the king of breakfast TV, and he's back.
Eamon Holmes, back on the TV with me this morning.
Even remember my name.
I know, it's been 4 months. You have holy water by your bed?
Oh, yes. Already to bless.
Yeah. Oh, Eamon. Oh.
Why do you not believe anything I say?
Eamon Holmes back on GB News Breakfast at 6 a.m.
Hello, I'm Esther McVeigh.
And I'm Philip Davis.
Whether you're watching or listening on TV, online or on radio, we handpick the latest stories, debates and expert opinions for your weekend. So whether that's politics, news or showbiz, we've got it covered.
Join us every Saturday morning at 10 o'clock on GB News.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
Why not take us home with you by visiting the GB News shop at gbnews.store. You'll find all the official merchandise, a really good present actually for yourself, your friends or your family.
We ship across the UK mainland at no extra cost. GB News, the People's Channel.
I tell you what, it's really popped off in the inbox, ladies and gentlemen, in relation to our fight, which GB News is apparently genuinely going to host between Lee Anderson, the Deputy Chair of the Conservative Party, and Steve Bray, that gobby bloke with the megaphone who stands outside Parliament and annoys the living heck out of everybody. I've been asking who you want on the undercard, and we've just had a late entry for Michelle Dewberry versus Kay Burley, which I think would, well, that'd put bums on seats, wouldn't it? Get your ideas and suggestions coming in, gbviews@gbnews.uk. I am not joking now. We are seriously, as a news channel, in talks to host a boxing match between Lee Anderson and Steve Bray. So that was the news that broke to me this morning. There we go. Anyway, welcome back. The Defence Secretary is the latest person to publicly criticise everyone's favourite prince. Military man Ben Wallace has said that Prince Harry boasting about slotting 25 Taliban fighters undermines the nature of the army as a team game. Well, the Duke of Sussex has already received a barrage of criticism for revealing these details, and he's even been mocked by Taliban leaders, which I think, you know, when he's being mocked by ordinary people on the streets, American cartoonists and indeed the Taliban, you have managed to almost alienate absolutely everybody from every different angle there. But joining me now is Tim Cross, who is a retired army officer. Tim, thank you very much. Is there any truth to what Ben Wallace has said here? Has Prince Harry undermined the military now by doing this, or is Ben Wallace, does he not know what he's talking about?
No. Ben Wallace knows exactly what he's talking about. He's a very capable Defence Secretary. And he's right. I think there's 3 or 4 issues here. One is, to be honest, I haven't got a clue how Prince Harry thinks that he's killed a certain number of people. Most casualties are caused at a distance. He was a helicopter pilot firing into crowds or into, suspected Taliban. Casualties are taken, but not all of them are killed. Quite a lot are just wounded. I mean, the normal rate is about 1 to 3 or 4 in terms of killed and wounded. Others will seem to have, been hit, but actually just lying down and protecting themselves. So there's all sorts of issues here about how he thinks he knows how many casualties he's caused. But Ben Wallace's point is absolutely right. He's being supported by all sorts of people who are enabling him to go into combat, from the people alongside him at the front there and others who are supporting the helicopter squadrons and the sustainability, the logistics, etc. And they, they're all part of a team, and we don't keep a record of scores. I mean, casualty figures are notoriously unreliable. All the figures coming out of Ukraine, frankly, are almost not quite meaningless, but they're all exaggerated. You only go back to any campaign to see casualty figures that are being, thrown around to know that they don't reflect reality. And I'm afraid Prince Harry's lost the plot here. He was actually a very popular officer, I have to say, and a very good pilot. But I think since he's left the military, he's rather lost his way.
I had an individual on earlier on who was basically saying to me that what in his view, what we're witnessing here is Prince Harry actually suffering with PTSD and potentially going through a massive self-sabotage phase. And when it comes to revealing how many people you at least think you've killed, I mean, that's absolutely not the done thing anyway, is it? I mean, do you think there's more to it than meets the eye? Do you think we are potentially watching Prince Harry having a breakdown?
Well, I don't know. I've never met Prince Harry. I've met many members of the royal family and had the privilege of meeting, quite a lot of them a lot over time, but I never met personally with Harry. I don't know whether he's suffering from PTSD or not. I think he's lost his way. I worry for him. I worry that he's surrounded by bad advisors. I think, these last few years he has definitely gone astray. And I am therefore, I'm concerned that he would write this sort of stuff. Right. He seems to think he's surrounded by enemies. Clearly, he doesn't like the media much, other than when he wants to use the media in order to pass his own messages around. So I think he's pretty lost, and I'm sorry for that. I feel for him. I wish he would pull himself around and crack on with living a normal life as best he can. I worry for his family, actually, as much as anything, and his children too.
On that note, just quickly and finally, I mean, Ben Wallace is perfectly within his rights to wade into this, of course. Has Harry's comments actually made it more likely that we're going to see attacks against our military or our public? Because if it does, then, well, Harry's put lives at risk with his comments about how many Taliban fighters he slaughtered.
I've heard people say that that's the case. I don't go along with it, to be honest. The military are always under threat from all sorts of things, part of what we do. But I regret that we've opened up this debate again. To be honest, the best thing that I think could happen is that Prince Harry could just gently slide away and just get on with his life. And raising these issues again, I don't think is particularly helpful. I don't think it's added to the threat, frankly.
OK, good stuff. Well, on that note, we'll move on then. Thank you very much. Tim Cross there is a retired Army officer. Great stuff. Take care. All right, Tim. Right now, more on our top story. Face-to-face interviews with thousands of asylum seekers could be scrapped in favour of Home Office questionnaires in a bid to cut soaring backlogs of cases. Well, the plans aim to speed up the process for people from nations that typically have a high grant rate. But you might be surprised to know which those nations are. They include Afghanistan, they include Syria, they include Yemen, they include Libya. And it's thought that there are currently more than 160,000 outstanding asylum claims. And by the way, that doesn't mean that they're really great asylum claims. That's people who haven't yet been processed. There's also been questions raised over the Prime Minister and Home Secretary's claims that channel migrants are gaming the system, because it comes as the Home Office announced that 85% of all small boat migrants claiming to be victims of modern slavery were found to have their claims as legitimate, which is hardly a surprise, is it? Joining me now is the Conservative councillor and former special advisor, it's Claire Pearsall, and UK immigration lawyer, it's Harjap Singh Bangal. Thank you very much. Great to have you both on the show. Claire, I will start with you. Would this particular questionnaire scheme just give us an open-door migration policy with 2 terror hotspots?
It does feel a little bit desperate, and it does feel as though the questions are going to be heavily weighted. I think we need to understand more from the Home Office as to what the questions are there to do, what information is going to be ascertained, and what information they have on the individual in the first place. We need to understand the identity. We need to know where that person has actually come from. And I'm not sure that a questionnaire laid out is going to provide that, whereas a face-to-face interview absolutely would. So I can see why they want to cut the backlog, and I can see why they're looking at doing something to solve this problem. But it just feels a little bit desperate, and I don't think it's actually going to help anyone at all.
Harjap, I'll bring you in now. UK immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bangal. Would a face-to-face interview provide more security in terms of who we let in, do you think?
Yeah, of course. It also gives an opportunity to determine whether a person is telling the truth as to where they come from. Often interpreters are used to deduce dialects. In the case of, say, where a lot of Pakistanis used to claim to be Afghans because they lived near the border, and we had a lot of Kenyans claiming to be Somalians, but in fact the interpreters would then pick up, hold on, their accent is a bit different, they don't sound as if they're from Afghanistan, push them further, and they would ask them, questions would be asked, and it would be worked out that they weren't from the area. So filling out a questionnaire, actually this used to happen in the past. It used to be called a SEF, a self-evidence form, and it replaces the interview process. This is purely because to drive down the backlog. And whereas we welcome any attempt to drive down a backlog created by the government and the Home Office in the first place, it shouldn't come at the expense of deciding which is genuine claim and which isn't. And it shouldn't be a PR stunt to say in a year's time, just before an election, oh, look at this, I've managed to reduce the backlog by 10,000, when in the way you've done it is very questionable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, Claire, just, you know, it's absolute nonsense, isn't it? He wants to stop the boats at the same time as introducing a policy that, frankly, I mean, I would imagine would encourage more boats.
I'm not sure if it will encourage more boats. I think they're going to come because the only way to claim asylum is to physically be in the United Kingdom. It feels, again, like policy made on the hoof. It's not thought through. And also the surrounding steps of it are not thought through. So if you're going to look at 12,000 claims, you're going to decide those. There will inevitably be a very high rate of acceptance. what's going to happen with those individuals? I'm not sure the communities they're currently living in have the room. There isn't the surplus housing stock. Where are the surplus jobs going to come from now that they're allowed to work? So all of these things, it's one thing at a time, not a whole approach to it, which encompasses every part. And that's what an immigration system should be. It shouldn't just be done in piecemeal.
No, and I literally do not understand how Rishi Sunak can have the brass neck if this does come off and go, oh, look, everybody, I've managed to clear the asylum seeker backlog without deporting anyone and just waving them all in. I mean, it seems a bit odd. I mean, anyone could do that. Anyone could. That's not a solution. Well, I mean, it is a solution, but I don't think it's the right one, is it? But, Harjab, can I ask you about some 85% of people who claim modern slavery, who come over the channel, are being granted modern slavery. They're being accused of gaming the system. Again, are we just waving these people through as well because we can't be bothered to fight it?
No, I think it's been grossly misrepresented. The official Home Office figures today have come out, and they've actually said that only 7% of total applicants claim to be victims of modern slavery, and out of them, 85% are assessed and then agreed. So, in fact, you know, if we look at the 100,000 people who claim asylum, then out of them, only 7% claim, and out of them, 85%. So, whereas we were previously told by the Home Office, or definitely it was, alleged that there were large numbers gaming the system. That's not actually true. And once again, it's another politically motivated stunt to try and say, well, we're going to cut down on the modern slavery laws. What hasn't been spoken about is how we're going to stop the gangs, how we're going to stop the boats. And in fact, don't you think that it's going to be a selling point for the gangs now to say, you know what, if you claim asylum in the UK, all you have to do is fill out a form, get permission to work. There's no even face-to-face interview. You're going to up the rate. This is going to up the rate for the marketers. You're going to make them more money. You know, it's almost like saying drug dealers saying to drug users, well, they're going to be easily available now, drugs on the street. All you got to do is fill out a form and you'll be able to get your drugs. And this is exactly what's going to happen. It's not going to stop it. You've got to look at the root cause of the people. It's the gangs. You're not going to stop the gangs. There's no investment or infrastructure to stop the gangs. There's no special elite units to go out and catch these gangs. We can go out and catch drug dealers. We can go out and kill Osama bin Laden. We can get Saddam holed up in the middle of a Muslim country.
Yeah, but we can't.
A few gangs who are using the same route.
I'm with you.
Years.
But this is why it fuels speculation. There's stuff like this. There's some kind of, and I'm not suggesting this, by the way, but it fuels speculation, doesn't it? There's some kind of sinister undertone, because people do find it incredibly hard to believe that we are unable to go and topple these gangs that are out there. I've had a wonderful email in here from Rick, who says, I am willing to, free of charge, interview and assess the 160,000 outstanding applications. And he says he'll do it in a month. Well, I think Rick might have bitten off more than he could chew there. But my point is this, Claire, and I'll give you the final word on this. Surely it would be a better solution to actually employ more people to assess these claims than it would be to well, I would imagine. I mean, we might now potentially have people assessed via a questionnaire and a computer, for goodness sake, based on their answers, Claire. I mean, this is a cop-out, isn't it?
It absolutely is. You need more people to make those decisions. Otherwise, it is merely a tick box exercise. And the criminal gangs are going to look at the 5 countries that are going to get the most acceptance. And the business model is going to say, right, you need to claim that you are from one of these 5 countries. So, no, you need face-to-face interviews, absolutely, and you need to crack down on the criminal gangs. But this, again, just feels a little bit like a publicity stunt. We are in election periods coming up, so you can see why they're grasping at straws.
Well, yeah, I can. Look, both of you, thank you very, very much. It's Claire Pearsall there, who's Tory councillor and former special advisor, and UK immigration lawyer Harjap Singh Bangal. And you know what? We've done 2 debates on this, ladies and gentlemen. We've had a human rights expert. We've also had a UK immigration lawyer. We've had a couple of Tories on as well. And what is fascinating is that no one from either side thinks that this is a good idea, and they all agree that this is less safe. So there's not even any dispute on that. Normally the Human Rights Brigade pipe up, don't they, and they say, oh, absolutely, everybody's who they say they are. Even with this now, they're saying, actually, look, there's no way that you can justify this because, basically, we don't know who a lot of these people are, and why on earth would we not give them some kind of verbal interview? So there you go. We've managed to unite people in their disdain for this policy, if indeed it ever happens. Right, GBViews at gbnews.uk. Keep your views coming in. OK, because I want to know what you think about who should be on the undercard for our massive GB News scrap, which we're having between Lee Anderson and Steve Bray. We've got some cracking suggestions here. Angela Rayner's proving popular, not for the right reasons, but then, you know, whenever is she? The Office, moving on now, the Office for Students has proposed new rules that mean university lecturers would have to log any relationships that they have with students, OK? I personally didn't think that university lecturers were allowed to sleep with students, but that probably says more about my university career than it does anything else. The move is hoped to tackle sexual misconduct on campus after a voluntary scheme trialling the move proved ineffective, obviously. Some universities already ban lecturers from having relationships with students. Joining me now is political commentator and student Anna McGovern. Anna, thank you very much for being such a good sport here. I will not ask you the obvious question, of course, that would be rude, but were you as surprised as I was to know that lecturers apparently are allowed to actually sleep with students?
To be honest, yes, I was, and I'm surprised that it's taken this long for something like this to be proposed. And I think, especially for lecturers, actually taking advantage of students is incredibly creepy and very weird. You're in a position of power. Your job is to teach the students, and you're breaching, a very important relationship that you have, which is to educate the students, not trying to get into relationships with them. So I'm surprised it's taken this long to actually get here.
Yeah, indeed. I mean, you don't ever get the old whiff of it on campus, do you? Do you ever see that? Because, I mean, I must admit, I didn't clock any of it when I was at university, but I probably wasn't the target market of my university lecturers. I think that's pretty obvious. But, yeah, I mean, is it a thing? Does it happen?
I mean, I'm surprised as well because we've been having, again, lockdowns. We've had the university strikes. I'm very surprised how the lecturers are even meeting the students in the first place when a majority of the education has been over Zoom. So for a start, I'm very surprised with how this is taking place. But nevertheless, it is a problem. It's not something I've personally seen on my campus. I know for my university, they introduced consent training, which I don't think many people actually participated in or actually found beneficial at all, but it was more like a virtue signal, we've done our bit, we've taught the students this is what consent means, rather than actually tackling the problem at hand. So I think for that respect, a lot of that was platitude. So it's actually good to see some proper policy being put forward and keeping students safe from very dangerous relationships where lecturers or someone even in a position of power would be in a position to take advantage of students.
Yeah, I mean, it split the office, this, actually, because I did hear quite a few people saying that they were all too aware of relationships between students and lecturers, actually, which was a remarkable insight into the lives of some of my colleagues here. But yes, I mean, sure, if you as a student find out that someone sitting next to you has managed to get a top grade, and then it also emerges that they've been sleeping with the professor, I mean, you would presumably have a thing or two to say about that.
Yeah, I think anyone would. I'm not sure if this is the case for other universities, but I know for mine, with the marking, how it works, it's anonymous. So there would be that, there wouldn't necessarily be obvious if that could take place. But I'm sure in some universities, that's definitely a thing that happens and has probably happened before. And it would definitely be unfair that you paid, however much you are in debt and then you've got someone who's just happens to be in a relationship with the lecturer and then just getting the benefit. And I think everyone would agree with that.
I must say, I was shocked when I read this story this morning, but there we go. Anna, thank you very much. Great to have you on the show, as always. Anna McGovern there is a political commentator and a student, and that is reacting to the news that lecturers now must log relationships with students. I'm amazed that they're allowed to sleep with them anyway, to be honest with you. But can you imagine? So they introduced a voluntary scheme, and it was ineffective. Yeah, of course, because who's going to voluntarily say that they had a one-night stand with a student? But anyway, moving on. From a story about relationships to one about divorce. It's a window into the future of all of those students, isn't it? The top UK areas for marriage breakdowns have been revealed, and the number one spot, Norwich, with a whopping 12.8%. The figures published by the ONS also reveal that around 42% of all marriages end in divorce. So there we go. With me now is Harry Benson, Research Director at the Marriage Foundation. Harry, I hope you're not divorced.
Good afternoon.
Are you divorced?
Oh. Am I? No. No. Could I work for the Marriage Foundation if I was? That wouldn't work. 36 years, 6 kids, skin of teeth.
Good. This is it. No, but seriously, it must absolutely depress the living heck out of you that you've got 42% or whatever it is of marriages in breakdown now. I mean, do you think people just go into it for the wrong reasons? What's going on? Why are they all not sticking with it?
Well, I mean, a lot of this data that you're talking about is actually old data, and also it doesn't actually reflect the divorce rate at all. When we're talking about Norwich or whatever, a lot of these seaside towns have got what seems to be very high proportions of divorced people. That's not the divorce rate. That's just a lot of people who've been divorced at some stage, purely by virtue of the fact they're older. But the actual what's happened to divorce rates in the last 25 years is that they've gone down to early 1970s levels. So we're now back to where we were in sort of early 70s, just after the big divorce law reform happened in the late 60s. So divorce rates are really low at the moment, actually.
All right. Harry, I'm going to have to ask you, because I've recently got engaged, and I read things like this and I think, oh, gosh, you know, what's the point? People are falling out over the regular rows. The top row in the home is apparently whether or not someone's left the light on in a room and stuff, which, frankly, I do all the time. So please, just sell marriage to me, Harry. Why should I go through with the thing?
So the psychology of marriage is fantastic. When you get married, you do two things. One is you make a decision about your future. So you're sending a huge signal about what your intent is. You're removing any kind of lingering ambiguity, any kind of uncertainty in the relationship. The second thing is you then go and stand up and tell everybody about it, and they pat you on the head and say, great choice, Patrick, that's a fantastic decision, because you've chosen one person and you said no to all the other people, which is a huge risk. And those two things, if you want to commit to something, making a decision about it and then telling all your friends, that's the way it works. That's the psychology of marriage. And there's a reason why societies have been have regulated marriage for thousands of years. And that's it. It's still a good story. Well done.
Thank you, Aaron. There we go. Good stuff, Harry. Thank you. Harry Benson there, Research Director of the Marriage Foundation, selling marriage to a divorced nation. Right, I will see you in a bit. I'm back at 3 p.m. tomorrow. Take it easy.
It's all about family, being in people's living rooms, all the interaction and getting to know who our viewers and listeners are.
When I was young, my dad used to say, Nana, stop arguing. I wanted an outlet that would enable me to give my opinion.
People are going through a really hard time right now, and I know that you don't feel like you're being listened to by the establishment. I came to GB News because it's the People's Channel, and I want the audience to have their say on the events of the day.
We're dynamic. We do something different.
Democracy shows that the wisdom of the nation is in its people.
I get to travel to find out what the story is from a personal perspective.
The British people aren't fools. We know when we're not being told the full story.
We've got to work out how Britain moves forward from this.
It's the best country in the world.
The establishment had their chance. Now we're here to represent your views.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
Britain's watching.
We're proud to be GB News.
The People's Channel.
Britain's news channel.
Monday to Thursday, 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. Join me, Dan Wootton. I'll bring you the sharpest takes and hottest debates.
Do you not believe in prison? I don't believe in prison.
I'm completely stunned. I guarantee you there'll be no spin, no bias, no censorship.
I actually was personally quite offended by it.
And no reason to go to bed.
So I guess they've always been quite woke.
That's Dan Wootton tonight on TV, radio and online. Monday to Thursday from 9 p.m. till 11 p.m. on GB News. The People's Channel. Britain's news channel.
Hello, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and you can join me every weekday 6 till 7 on Jubes and Kerr.
You're an inspiration to us all.
Clip that bit up.
Well, you are.
That's my ringtone. My political ambitions are, those days are gone, I can tell you.
She's only teasing. Go on.
He's probably going to want to lay down now. I'll give him 2 minutes to have one. Let's respectfully disagree. That's what we like on Jubes and Kerr. Come and join us. GB News, the People's Channel.
Michelle Dewberry, weekday evenings at 6 o'clock.
I'm Simon Evans. Join me on GB News for Headliners at 11 p.m.
What's the scoop?
I'll be joined by two of the country's top comedians.
That's right.
As we take a look at tomorrow's newspapers tonight.
We're going to get into trouble.
If it's a big story, we'll be covering it.
Spill some tea on him.
There we go.
But we'll also have some fun.
I wouldn't stick up a bank.
My father didn't love me.
So anyway.
Headliners every night from 11 on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
We are GB News, the People's Channel.
And right across the United Kingdom.
You can find us on Sky Channel 512.